Starting off our list with an honorable mention at number 10, we have Captain Carter. Normally, I'd put my girl Peggy higher up on any list, but since she's less weird and more awesome, we've gotta put her here. Captain Carter actually originally debuted in the Marvel Puzzle Quest video game during a celebration for Captain America's 75th anniversary, but was given a fully fleshed out backstory and has been a fan favorite ever since. In a universe where Steve Rogers is assassinated before he can be given the Super Soldier Serum, Peggy Carter is instead the one who becomes an incredibly strong and iconic hero for the Allied forces. The comics would continue her adventures, with her universe's New York City coming under attack with nuclear weapons by the Red Skull, and eventually lead to her joining the superhero team the Exiles after their multiverse-spanning adventures brought them into contact. Next up on our list is the center point for one of the most controversial Marvel storylines of all time, the infamous Hydra Cap. Initially appearing to be the main Marvel Universe's Captain America, this version of Steve Rogers had grown up indoctrinated by Hydra's fascist ideologies and was actually sent to America to kill the creator of the superhuman serum for the Axis powers, but instead wound up deceiving his way into receiving the serum himself. Having wound up in the main Marvel Universe when their Steve Rogers was rejuvenated back to his usual age in a different storyline, this Hydra Cap was able to hide his evil intentions until the pivotal moment that he declared to the world those shocking words, "Hail Hydra." Seeing one of comics' most inspiring icons twisted in such a way was definitely unexpected, and definitely earns a surprising spot on this list. Coming in at number 8, we have the blood-sucking Vampire Cap. In a universe where Captain America fought and then lost against the villain Baron Blood, soon the entire Avengers team was overtaken by his vampiric disease. Consumed with a lust for both blood and power, this Steve Rogers began a year-long killing spree that culminated in killing Baron Blood and taking his place as the new Vampire King. This version had all of the benefits of the Super Soldier Serum, in addition to new vampire abilities such as healing so advanced, he was able to survive getting decapitated when facing off against several other Marvel heroes. I guess going for the head isn't as effective as we all thought.
Number 7. JLA Act of God. Admittedly, this is a cool premise, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense, which is what's weird about it. In JLA Act of God and Elseworlds 3-issue miniseries, we get to explore a world where all the heroes of Earth have simultaneously lost their powers. Well, at least almost all of them anyways. How did this happen? Black light? Somehow the world being hit with a flash of black light results in almost everyone losing their powers. I guess normally superheroes don't go to raves or anything, where black light is, I feel like, very common. Although this is attributed to the black light, some might call it an act of God. A later on, very suddenly, devoutly Christian Diana Prince at least would probably claim that. Diana, haven't you met gods? How does that make sense? What's really ridiculous is in the first issue, as we go through the moment this happened, the world over, we get to see just how diverse not only everyone's powers are, but also when it comes to the source of their powers, just how diverse it is. In one page, we go from Steel losing complete control of his systems and suit as he plummets to his doom, to Aquaman losing his ability to connect with the creatures of the sea telepathically and his ability to breathe underwater. At the same time, Kyle Rayner also has lost control of his Green Lantern ring, which seems to now just be, I guess, a really unique and trendy looking accessory. How could a flash of black light affect almost everyone in this same way? Like I said, it's a cool premise, kinda wonky execution though. How is Steel affected by this? Didn't Steel make his suit? I'm confused. Number 6. Facets. What happens when we get to see the Teen Titans as they'd be in a fantasy setting? Well, a whole lot of weirdness. Raven, of course, ends up evil, known as a deadly and beautiful sorceress, Queen Raven. She creates her own loyal servant and accomplice with Victor Stone, or at least she tries to, transforming him permanently into a cyborg. It turns out this isn't all that Raven's been up to though. She has a whole collection of prisoners whom she has transformed in some way, and when Cyborg refuses to join her, she also contemplates holding him there with the rest of them. So apparently she does this a lot. Seems like her deals with people don't usually work out. I guess she's just hoping that one day that'll change. She's like, I'll just keep doing it. Eventually someone will be loyal to me. If I try it enough times, it's gotta work. In this story, Koriand'r is a prisoner of some goblin mages who use cosmic energy to transform her into Starfire. The comic features an all-out battle between Raven and Starfire, joined of course by the rest of the Titans. Nightwing goes on a trip inside Phantasm's cloak, literally looks like he's tripping out, and eventually Trigon joins the party when he is summoned by his daughter Raven. You can check it all out in the 1994 New Titans Annual. It's weird. It's definitely weird. Also, some of these outfits are interesting. Number 5. Superman at Earth's End. I don't even know where to begin with this comic. Oh boy. Okay, so Superman here is one of the first iterations of course, the old man heroes to come that we've come to love so much. See, before there was Old Man Logan, there was Old Man Supes. In this Elseworld story, we are in a post-apocalyptic future where machines rule supreme and mutants basically run amok. Also, there is an army of Batmen and vicious biker gangs because I mean, why not? The year I believe is 2102, so possibly this is what we'll be dealing with in just over 80 years time. Honestly, the way things are going, I could maybe see that being our future. Superman is recharging and recuperating his strength when he hears about the plan to nuke Gotham City. He aims to save the city, but of course without doing any killing, because you know, he's Superman. And of course, no guns, because he's Superman. Except for the part where he uses guns to kill people. Except for that part. Mostly Robo and really bad people though, so I guess for Supes it doesn't count. It features the famous "I am a man" memeable moment, which actually was shouted in response to an android by the way, so out of context it's really weird, but within context it actually like kinda makes some sense. It's still pretty weird, but it's not as weird. Also, shortly after claiming that he doesn't need weapons, Superman chooses to wield a ridiculous megagun known as the Expunger. It's crazy. I just love that he's like, I don't need weapons because I have powers. I would never do that. And then like flip to like 2 pages later and he's like, look at this giant expunger, I'm gonna use this mega gun. Number 4. All-Star Batman and Robin. Not so much a story as a full series, but I have other full series on this list, so it's fine. All-Star Batman and Robin consists of 10 issues, all of which are pretty weird when it comes to the depiction and characterization of a lot of our favorite superheroes, villains, and their allies even. Once again, we get a super jacked version of Joker in this comic. We also get a version of Vicky Vale who seems far more obsessed with Superman's manhood and dates with Bruce Wayne than any kind of serious reporting. And of course, then there are Batman and Robin. What a dynamic. Batman in this comic is the worst kind of hero, an entitled one. This is the version who refers to himself as the goddamn Batman and makes Dick eat rats and sleep in the Batcave initially. Because he's Batman and he can do that. He also torments Hal Jordan Green Lantern by painting himself, Robin, and the entire room and corridor yellow, and also serves and consumes yellow food and drink around him, with Batman enjoying some lemonade and Robin devouring what appears to be an all yellow ice cream cone. All-Star Batman and Robin has to be one of the weirdest multiverses out there. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, what is happening? What is this characterization? Number 3. JLA created equal. Okay, so All-Star Batman and Robin is the not so great kind of weird, but JLA created equal is just the weird kind of weird. In this 2-part Elseworld story, we get a glimpse into a world where all the men, or almost all the men, were killed off by an unexpected and sudden plague. The only 2 left alive are Superman and Lex Luthor in this reality, and yet for all the powerful women who remain, this book sure manages to still be about the male characters within it. In Created Equal, Superman attempts to help the rest of the new, almost all-female JLA figure out a way to repopulate the Earth. I say almost because Superman's still there, so yeah. The main concern is how to ensure the survival of the human male gender, as if they made clones with their technology and resources, they'd actually only be able to produce female ones. I guess they can't like tamper with the genes, they can't like tamper with the DNA, or I don't know how you make clones anyway, so I probably shouldn't tell other people how to do it. Eventually, Lois Lane and Clark Kent end up conceiving a son who is born and named Adam. He accidentally hugs his mother to death, and then Lex, being Lex, unleashes a plan to take control of all the young men who were created and raised on Themyscira, thanks to Adam's existence and his resilience. Also, he makes them all bald, because this is Lex Luthor, so yeah. Oh, what a weird story. Come and join me, and also I'll be bald. because you all have lovely hair and it offends me. Number 2, a Batman Reptilian. Ah yes, the story of an alien baby that belongs to Killer Croc because he was influenced by aliens while inside his mother's womb, which is how he's even mutated and also makes him like, I guess, a hybrid alien-human creation technically. In this beautiful yet bizarre story, Batman is attempting to track down whoever is killing all of his rogues. What he finds out though is that it isn't any one of the other villains, but Croc's baby that he just gave birth to. Killer Croc, of course, didn't know that he could do that. I mean, neither did we. It turns out that this is a result of him being part alien in origin, or being tampered with by aliens when he was like a fetus. The newborn babe, it turns out, just wants its mama, but for what purpose remains to be seen. Killer Croc can't nurture it, as you know, he doesn't have like the biological equipment for that. After we get through that whole slog of that's not gonna work, it's also implied that the giant alien monster baby wants Croc to mate with it, which is also thankfully out of the question when it comes to Croc's willingness, so thank goodness, because I thought this better not be where this is going, oh my goodness. Did I mention that Batman is also a huge jerk throughout this entire series? Cause yeah, this is Garth Ennis behind the writing wheel, and that is very much a thing. Which I'm not surprised by, that's kind of Ennis' whole thing, so yeah. I actually like Batman being a butt in that story more than I like him being a butt in Frank Miller's All-Star, so yeah. Number 1, Batman Last Night on Earth. This one was where the thumb came from in part 1 of this list. I had intended to actually include this story there, but then I got distracted by the Batman and Lobo crossover. Understandably so, I think, because that's also super weird. But that's fine, because it just means that Last Night on Earth gets a higher spot on this list of bizarre multiversal DC stories. Batman Last Night on Earth is a book that exists outside of the continuity and belongs to the DC Black Label line. Also, Reptilian is part of that same line, just so you know. Black Label primarily is made up of titles that are more adult in terms of their content and their themes. Here, that translates to Batman wearing a straitjacket version of his suit in a post-apocalyptic future, where Joker is just a head in a jar. They also end up fighting giant monster baby Green Lantern constructs in issue number 1, just to give you a sense of the level of weird that we're dealing with here. But it's like a fun weird. It's like a, I'd recommend this weird. I give it 2 weird thumbs up.
Leapfrog. This spring-loaded villain appears in the What If that has Aunt May gaining Spider-Man's powers instead of Peter Parker. And before you jump down my throat, Leapfrog does appear in other comics first, I know this, actually first showing up in Daredevil number 25, but this iteration of the character is clearly meant to be more slapstick and ridiculous than he normally is, which is saying a lot, considering this must be one of the silliest villains in Marvel. But case in point, his first appearance in this What If issue shows him crashing through a brick wall and just swearing at everybody, screaming expletives as he bounces past a group of civilians and a news reporter. He ends up in a battle with Aunt May's Spider-Woman and gets thwarted by nothing other than a stretchy mass of dough that Aunt May uses to lasso him into a tree. He's just clearly such a dumb villain and appears for what I could only imagine was comedic value to the already hysterical What If issue.
Number 9, Ghost Grandpa. While technically Ghost Riders are supposed to be heroes, this one doesn't seem to be too nice in terms of the brief glimpse that we see of him. And it's because of that I decided to include him as a kind of like a low-key villain. Ghost Grandpa makes his appearance in the 1977 What If series in issue number 34, where we ask the question, what if Ghost Rider had possessed someone else? Instead of Johnny Blaze, of course. The answer allows us to take a look at a few different candidates, including Ghost Skater and Ghost Baby, but while both talk about punishing evildoers and getting vengeance, Ghost Grandpa only seems to be interested in getting revenge on his nurse for delaying his glass of warm milk.
Number 8 is Wolverine, Lord of Vampires. This villain is bizarre because it's the embodiment of a character we've all known forever, but who doesn't really exhibit any of his typical traits. In What If number 24, Wolverine takes on the Lord of Vampires, who tries to bite him to turn Wolverine into a vampire himself. And since Wolverine was too badass to simply be turned into a vampire, he decides it's only in his character to kill the guy. And he does, but what happens when you kill the Lord of Vampires is that you take on the title yourself. And this is when Wolverine starts to change into a very strange version of himself. Right away, Wolverine starts turning his former friends into vampires, with his demeanor totally shifting as he uses like mind control powers on them, which is just pretty strange on its own. Honestly, this is what it is. It's just weird seeing Wolverine without any level of humanity in him anymore. Something about this transformation doesn't seem right and gives me some very conflicting feelings towards the whole thing. Although I gotta say, he does turn out to be pretty powerful Lord of Vampires. He even takes out Doctor Strange in a harrowing battle, which says a lot for Wolverine on its own. This suggests that his power level is pretty heavily increased after getting the title of Lord of Vampires. Doesn't change the pop collar and bat-eared hairdo though. This is a list about weird villains, not powerful ones. Although he might end up on both, he still ranks on this one for sure. I mean, just look at him.
Number 7, Maggie Nito. Maggie Nito appears in a humor issue of What If. She's the one who terrorized this poor old styrofoam skeleton Wolverine. She's technically supposed to be the female child version of Magneto, who is known in the comics for ripping the adamantium out of Wolverine over the course of a few horrifying panels of comics. Maggie Nito, on the other hand, doesn't need any powers to hurt her version of Wolverine, who is much more cowardly in comparison to his main continuity counterpart. Which, I mean, makes sense considering he literally has a styrofoam skeleton. I mean, I would be afraid of Maggie Nito too, if I had a styrofoam skeleton. Also, just in general, she seems like a mean little girl.
At number 6, we have the Zombieverse. This is one I'm sure many of you are familiar with, as it's become pretty popular over the years. Basically, Earth 2149 is overrun by zombies, and they don't stop short of turning superheroes to the ghoulish side as well as humans. What we end up with is a whole universe with superpowered zombies jumping and flying around, trying to destroy everything in their paths, including their former teammates and lifelong friends. It's a strange place that puts into question the integrity of superpowered beings and sort of tarnishes the dignity of all our favorite heroes all at once. But it's all in good fun in the end, and we get an exciting, gory, and very weird read as a result. At number 5 is the Amalgam Universe. This is a strange one because it outlines the event of a what-if scenario where Marvel and DC characters are mashed into hybrids. In Marvel vs. DC number 3, characters from Marvel's Earth 616 and DC's New Earth morph together, leaving us with some pretty cool but ultimately just flat out weird characters, like a Superman Captain America mashup and Iron Man getting a power ring turning him into Iron Lantern. And of course, with these newly powered up Amalgam heroes, there also has to be a mashup version of the two different worlds' villains too, right? So we get Thanoside, a very cleverly named mashup of Darkseid and Thanos. What makes this universe so weird is that it's a very rare example of the two comic book companies coming together in unison. And the resulting contents are just as bizarre as this rare partnership is. So there you have it. The Weird World of the Amalgam Universe at number 5. And at number 4 is Weird World. I feel like there's no need to explain why this one ended up on the list given the title. But weirdly enough, Weird World isn't actually that weird, all things considered. Weird enough to make it on this list, but I still feel like they had an opportunity to make a world so weird that they clinched the number 1 spot on this list. But still, it's a weird one. I am tired of saying that word. It's a Marvel universe that features magical creatures like goblins, dragons, and zombies. And there are just perpetual battles going on there between gods representing dark and light. It's hard to tell how it ties in with Marvel superheroes, so in the context of the Marvel multiverse, it's definitely weird and a bit out of place, but it also just seems like a typical medieval fantasy landscape to me. It's almost weirder that this world doesn't really match its name, but I guess weird is weird. At number 3 is the Marvel Apes universe. Featured in the Marvel Apes miniseries, this alternate universe naturally features ape people versions of all the heroes we know and love, and everybody else for that matter. Basically, apes roam the earth, and even the Avengers have changed their name to suit the environment, being widely known as the Ape-Vengers. But if you think that's weird, it gets even more bizarre when we learn that Captain America is secretly a vampire who drinks the blood of his enemies. And then eventually it's further revealed that it was never Captain America in the first place, but a Nazi vampire who shapeshifted into Cap years ago after drinking his blood. I honestly don't know what the writers were thinking with this one, but at least it was able to rank high on this list. That's one thing it's got going for itself. At number 2 is the universe where Aunt May is bitten by the radioactive spider. In a short feature story of What If issue 23, we see what it would be like if Aunt May were to take up the mantle of Spider-Man with web-slinging powers and all. And the result is something so bizarre that I've already covered this universe on at least 3 other lists so far. It just stands out. and not necessarily for the right reasons, always. I think they sort of lose me when Aunt May starts using the dough from a bread loaf she's baking as a weapon, but this is one of the best examples of the fun that writers can have with the concept of a multiverse, where basically anything goes as long as it's set in another universe, which is kind of a blessing and a curse for Marvel all at the same time. At least Spider-May is paired up against Leapfrog, because if she successfully took down any truly reputable villain with her dough lasso, I think I'd have lost a decent chunk of respect for Marvel, if I'm being completely honest. At number 1 is the Larval Earth universe. In this world, all the Marvel heroes and villains alike have evolved into cute and cuddly animals, with characters like Daredevil, Nick Fury, and the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's no wonder why this universe exists as a one-off, although it may have been just weird enough that it went full circle and became kind of iconic. I mean, the ironically popular Spider-Ham, aka Peter Porker, also comes out of this alternate universe, so there's that. Larval Earth is probably the weirdest universe to actually be considered part of the official Marvel canon, and with villains like Kangaroo the Conqueror, Sand Manatee, and Magsquito, readers are left wondering whether or not this whole multiverse concept is going too far. But personally, I think the odd, fun, and weird universe never hurt nobody. I mean, who could be mad at Black Panda? I mean, that's not much of a stretch considering he's normally named after an animal, right?
Coming in at number 10 is Kang the Conqueror. Kang is a little bit of an interesting pick for this list, as he totally can be stopped and has been multiple times. Thanks to the advanced time period he comes from though, Nathaniel Richards has an increased lifespan, making him look 40 when he's actually 7 years old. That's fine, that doesn't make him unstoppable. What makes him unstoppable is a couple of things. For starters, as most people know, Kang has a huge relationship with time. A version of this guy exists at almost all moments of the time stream, and not just one version of him, as there have been Kangs from different universes that have shown up as well. So not only can Nathaniel Richards show up at any point in the time stream in any of his numerous identities that all have their own long history, but his alternate universe versions are almost always set to make an appearance in his place. And then, on top of that, until recently, Nathaniel had the ability to transfer his consciousness to another body when he passed away. Nathaniel, Ramatut, Iron Lad, Kid Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Immortus himself, Mr. Griffin, He Who Remains, whatever you want to call him, Kang the Conqueror is pretty much unstoppable. Number 9. Galactus. The being formerly known as Galen of the planet Ta lived before the modern cosmos in the previous cosmos. Galen gestated with the sentience of the universe for billions of years, transforming into the devourer of worlds, finding sustenance by ingesting entire planets, preferably those with living sentient beings that have much more energy for him to harness. Now when Galactus destroys and consumes a planet, he is sort of bringing balance to the universe, kind of like how life is given and taken away every day on Earth, which makes him an essential part of the universe. He's known for the destruction of the Skrull Empire and has attempted to devour the Earth so many freaking times, and I guess other planets for that matter too, or whatever. Galactus is also famous for his heralds such as Silver Surfer and the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and so many others, and while they are all powerful beings themselves, usually even before they gain the herald power boost, they don't hold a candle to Galactus himself. His only caveat is that Galactus's power depends on his planet's consumption, so a weakened Galactus has been taken out before, but if he eats like 4 or more planets or something, he's been able to defeat multiple mad celestials all by himself. He's powered by food, and I think pretty much all of us can understand that. Coming in at number 8, Abraxas. Abraxas is the polar opposite of the cosmic entity Eternity. So, being the opposite of Eternity, his whole reason for existing is to destroy all of the multiverse, which, I'll be honest, there are a few different characters in Marvel who exist for that reason, and funnily enough, a bunch of them are on this list. Abraxas is tied to Galactus too, because when Galactus would consume a planet, it would keep Abraxas in check. So, when Galactus is taken off the board in Galactus the Devourer, Abraxas is released and begins his path of ultimate destruction. As a cosmic entity, Abraxas' powers are essentially limitless, and his whole existence is kind of important to the universe, which means he can't really be taken out like a normal villain. So, how the heck do the heroes come out on top against this guy? Well, in Fantastic Four number 48 to 50, we learned of an incredibly powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier. It was used back then to threaten Galactus and stop him from destroying our Earth. Now the heroes, specifically Reed Richards, ended up using the Ultimate Nullifier to essentially rewrite reality, destroying reality and remaking it so that Abraxas just never existed. That's the route we had to go to here. Kinda makes you wonder why Marvel would even write such a powerful villain in the first place, but
And at 7, Phyla-Vell. After Genis Vell, then known as Captain Marvel, previously destroyed and recreated the universe, the new version was subtly altered with Phyla-Vell's existence being one of the changes. Phyla-Vell was the second artificially created offspring of Captain Mar-Vell, who was created by her mother Elysius in the new universe because her first attempt, Genis Vell, had been so successful. She fought her brother, who was insane at the time, and in the process of helping to restore his sanity, she then tried to claim the Captain Marvel title, though her brother refused to give it up. To save Rick Jones' girlfriend Marlo Chandler, Genis had to travel to the future to see what would be the cause of her future demise. He asked Phyla to stay behind on Earth to keep watch over Marlo, and in doing so she encountered the being known as Magus, who tried to kidnap Marlo. She and the telepath Moondragon foiled the plot, and Genis returned to Earth shortly after, telling her that he stopped a villainous plan to release Magus hundreds of years in the future, but wouldn't explain how. But like, bro, I just fought him, couldn't you have done that a little sooner? And at 6, AI Avengers. This android-based Captain Marvel was one of the many robotic versions of the Avengers created by Raz Malhotra, which were in turn inspired by Egghead and his AI Avengers. They were dispatched to fight off the Hulk and the forces of Hydra at the Mount, but were ultimately destroyed. But I mean, like, come on. An AI version of Captain Marvel is pretty weird, but honestly, based on what I talk about on Top 10 Gaming, it's par for the course for me. Halfway through into number 5, Genis Vell. After a falling out with Captain America, Rick Jones found himself mentally drawn to a pair of extraterrestrial golden bracelets, the Nega Bands. Donning the bands, Rick slammed his wrists together with all of his might, and his atoms traded places with those of the exiled Kree Captain Mar-Vell. Joined together, Rick and Captain Marvel lived a shared existence. During the epic Kree-Skrull War, Rick and Captain Marvel became pawns of the Kree Supreme Intelligence, who unleashed the untapped psionic potential of Rick's mind, the Destiny Force, to put an end to the war. Sometime later though, as a result of the exposure to deadly nerve gas, Captain Mar-Vell perished from incurable systemic cancer. As Rick slowly began to move on with his life, eventually getting married, Mar-Vell's love, Elysius, felt more alone than ever. Using Titanian science, Elysius sampled some of Mar-Vell's genetic structure to conceive a child, Genis. To protect him from Captain Mar-Vell's enemies, Genis was artificially aged to maturity and taken to an isolated world where he would be safe from harm. Upon discovering of his true lineage though, Genis donned wristlets modeled after the Negabands worn by his father and was determined to carry on his father's heroic tradition, eventually calling himself Captain Marvel. And at 4, William Mar-Vell. William Mar-Vell, also known as Billy Mar-Vell, was the combination of both versions of Captain Marvel from both DC and Marvel in the shared amalgam Earth. This version of the character shares the powers of both Captain Marvel and Shazam from the DC universe, since originally Shazam was named Captain Marvel. This version of the character was also a member of the Judgment League Avengers and first appeared in JLX number 1 from 1996. On this Earth 9602, he's actually a young boy who, when shouts the word Kree, transforms into a super scientifically enhanced adult hero. His fellow members of the Judgment League Avengers are not aware of this secret though. After Angel Hawk, Canary, and Goliath found Super Soldier, Captain Marvel soon joined and formed the Judgment League Avengers. He was then transported by Doctor Strange Fate with other members of the Judgment League to battle Thanoside. When Mariner was accused of blowing up oil freighters, the US government branded him an eco-terrorist, and Captain Marvel and other non-Metamutant members of the JLA captured him and imprisoned him without a trial. So kind of a little wishy-washy on the whole morals thing. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, MCU Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is depicted as a former US Air Force fighter pilot who was given superhuman abilities when a lightspeed engine test went wrong, and she was exposed to the cosmic energy of the Tesseract and subsequently transformed into a human-Kree hybrid known as Veers via blood transfusion. In 1995, on the Kree Empire's capital planet of Hala, Danvers, then known as Vers, suffered from amnesia and recurring nightmares involving an older woman, particularly as a former Air Force test pilot who acquired cosmic energy force powers from the Tesseract after an explosion that wiped her memory. So, you can kind of see where that was going. But I'm including this version of Captain Marvel not because she's weird, but because for some reason everyone seemingly hates this version. So much so that when I mentioned how the MCU Captain Marvel could beat the MCU Hulk since MCU Thanos beat him and she was going to beat MCU Thanos if he didn't have the Power Stone at least, everyone still got mad at me. And some still hate me to this day. You should have seen my DMs after that video went out. And still, sometimes I get messages about how some of these fans hate me, okay? All because of my literal second video on the channel. And that's the reason I included this, so I can finally say my piece. Redemption is finally mine! Penultimately, in at number 2, Mar-Vell. Mar-Vell is the Captain Marvel of the Marvel Ultimate Earth, Earth 1610. For millennia, an ancient extraterrestrial race called the Kree have tracked and studied a mysterious planet-eating creature they called Galactus. Sounds like a Skyrim shout. The Supreme Intelligence restricted this knowledge to specially trained high-level Kree, fearing that if the true nature of Galactus became common knowledge, it would drive their race insane. Several years before Galactus was due to arrive in the Sol system, the Kree staged a covert observation mission on Earth, and Plus Commander Mar-Vell underwent massive nanosurgery to appear human, going undercover as physicist Dr. Philip Lawson to investigate the human race. Growing fond of humans, Vell joined S.H.I.E.L.D.'s ACES program to speed up humanity's progress of the stars, helping to develop a zero-point energy source for manned spaceflight. On the day that the ACES-01 test article was going to be launched, the base was attacked by a Kree kill form with orders for Vell to aid humanities no further. Refusing, Vell just obliterated the kill form, but the effort left him powerless and he was captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. After questioning by General Nick Fury and Captain Carol Danvers, Vell briefed them, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Thor regarding the existence of Galactus and, kind of updated them on the whole situation. Finally, in at number 1, Actor Marvel. The man who would one day be known as the Captain was an ordinary but slightly stupid human from Brooklyn. He spent his life frequenting bars and getting into fights. As a child, his alcoholic mother hung his teddy bear from a noose, so yeah, that would kind of mess you up. However, after gaining his powers and joining the anti-traitor group known as Next Wave, the Captain would want to change his name. While looking into using the name of Captain Marvel, he actually found out about someone totally different from the Captain Marvel of Earth 616 that we know. Instead, he learned about an adult film star who was using that name. Yes, you heard me right. When trying to use the name of Captain Marvel, the Captain came across an adult film actor who was using this name. And honestly, I think that's probably one of the funniest versions of this character that there is. I don't care if it's not Carol Danvers or Mar-Vell, but it's someone going by the name of Captain Marvel making adult movies. Okay? And you know that's gonna be a number 1 spot for me, hands down. Technically, there is an Earth where all the Marvel characters are adult stars. And the MCU is just one big adult film franchise, which I guess would make the Avengers movies giant.
Number 10, Dr. Morrow. The interesting thing too about Dr. Morrow is that some spelling for this character is like Dr. Morrow, but if you actually look at the comic itself, it's Morrow with a U, so I believe it's Morrow with a U, but if you say Morrow and I say Morrow, that's also fine. I'm not gonna come for you. Dr. Morrow appears in the What If issue number 11 from the 1997 series. Here we answer the question, what if the Marvel bullpen had been transformed into the Fantastic Four? Being from a different time period, there are definitely some extremely sexist tones in this issue. A lot of it aimed sadly at fabulous Flo Steinberg, who stands in for Invisible Woman. But another ridiculous aspect of this issue, aside from that more serious one, are some of the villains that we see the bullpen version of the FF face off against. Like their first villain, Dr. Morrow. Dr. Morrow's island was the one that they planned on visiting before they were delivered some fan mail. Upon opening it up, they found a mysterious radio-like device which transformed them into the Fantastic Four, granting them powers after they were exposed to cosmic rays that the device emitted. Turns out that this was all part of a Skrull plot, which we find out later in the issue, and that Dr. Morrow was also a victim of a similar device. Oh no! But even with that, why did he attack them when they got to his island? Why is he a villain in all this? Why is he one of the first villains we run into? Did the transformation make him, I don't know, just really mad or something? Or violent? The reality is they probably just wanted to start the issue off with a good fight and a bit of mystery, but still, Morrow ends up being a pretty bizarre villain because of this. Because There's things that just aren't explained here. Oh well, I'm willing to come along for this strange ride in any what if. Number 9. Disappointed Loki. In the What If story, What If the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner, we get to see what would happen if the Hulk had kept Banner's wits and then ran into Loki's illusion, you know, with the train tracks and such. Turns out this version of the Hulk was too smart to fall for Loki's trap. Seeing the TNT on the train tracks, but believing it to be an illusion, meant that he would never be put onto a collision course with the Avengers and therefore would never join that team. Instead, Loki ends up disappointed, and Banner goes on to fight against Galactus, joining with Professor X and Reed Richards to create the new and extremely powerful uni-being of X-Man. Poor Loki though, he's like, but I set this trap in. Alright. I guess not all traps are winners. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to show some support for us on other platforms, head on over to Facebook, give us a like, give us a follow, it does help us out, and we're gonna have lots of exciting new content coming for you over there. Exciting. Number 8. Fake Captain America. Both weird and great in a lot of ways. Fake Captain America was William Burnside. Now, while William Burnside does exist in the 616 universe, where he was a well-meaning Captain America imposter driven mad by improper use of the super soldier serum, in the What If reality of Earth 84444, he ended up becoming obsessed with communists, paranoid that they could be lurking around every corner, which is kind of what happened in the main continuity, but in this one, he's less like, oh no, it's just the super soldier serum, and more like he made some conscious choices here. Modeling America into less of a democracy under the name of Captain America, Burnside would be beaten back by the real Captain America, who in this story doesn't resurface until 1984, which means that Burnside has a lot of time to basically do harm to the American image and the influence of the nation's people. This warning story and the speech the real Cap gives at the end are both still pretty relevant today, which is why this is like a great issue, but also why it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird how there's a lot of stuff in this that I feel like is still relevant, even though it's from 1984. Do we ever do new things, or does history just cycle in like some vicious loop? Probably that. Number 7. Colonel Bruce Banner. What if Bruce Banner was actually the monster and Hulk was just purely the good guy? Well, that is the question we dive into in issue 91 of the 1989 series. Here, Bruce Banner mistreats his wife, Betty Ross, who eventually becomes, of course, Betty Banner. Bruce is cruel and unkind, but after he is involved in a gamma radiation explosion, another half of him emerges, a glowing green, light-like figure who is gentle and kind and we know as Starman. Basically, this world's Hulk. And he was actually terrified of Bruce himself. Not only is this villain pretty interesting, unique, and strange, but the story is also like epically sad. Despite Betty reaching out for help to both her father and others around her, it seems that no one actually really believes Betty when it comes to the fact that like Bruce mistreats her. In the end, she is confined to a mental institution as she's believed to have gone insane. But at least there she appears to be safe from Bruce and his cruelty, so it's like a sad but I guess sort of happy ending. It's bittersweet is what it is. Ugh.
Number 6. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Look, I talked about Bat-Mite when discussing heroes, and he wasn't even really a hero. So how can I not mention the first 5th dimensional imp in this video? Plus he's got a fun name. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a reality warping imp obsessed with Superman, who, just like his rival Bat-Mite did with Batman, simply seeks to annoy the hell out of Superman and just prove he is smarter than him. Which is good, because he has a level of power that in other hands could cause the entire end of the multiverse. More on that later though. He can do almost anything imaginable if he wishes it. And his only weakness really is being convinced or tricked into saying his name backwards to send him back to the 5th dimension, which if you're trying to say it correctly is honestly a superpower in and of itself. Clitopizixum. I got it. Mxyzptlk. Number 5. Emperor Joker. Mr. Mxyzptlk has an extreme level of power, like I said. Also, like I said, if this power fell into the wrong hands, it could be potentially reality ending. Now, what hands could be worse than the psychotic hands of Batman's arch nemesis, the Joker? Well, that's exactly who gets the power in the Emperor Joker storyline. Mr. Mix gets bored and wants to give Joker 1% of his power, just to see the tricks Joker is able to pull pull off. But instead, the Joker tricks Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his power instead. Joker uses this power to rewrite all of reality to become his sick, twisted dream world. He eats the whole population of China out of a Chinese food container box. He keeps everyone stuck in a time loop, including Batman, who he introduces to the afterlife over and over every day forever. Oh, and he also turned Flash into a slow-moving Beast Man. Superman, the Spectre, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, being the only ones who can remember the former world, tried to do something about this all-powerful Joker. But that's just the problem. He is all-powerful. He destroys all of reality, but he can't bring himself to destroy Batman fully. And because of this, he loses control of his power, allowing the Spectre and Mr. Mix to steal it back and fix all of reality. But this story it's pretty nuts. Number 4. Condiment King. When the villainous Condiment King came on the scene, it was literally on the scene, as he appeared in the animated Batman TV show from 1992. One of the best, honestly. Condiment King was Buddy Stantler, a comedian who was brainwashed by the Joker into becoming a villain who wields condiment squirters and viciously horrible puns. I knew you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I've relished this meeting. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. Diabolical stuff like that. The puns get even worse in the comics, with his real name becoming a pun on its own. Mitchell Mayo. He isn't taken seriously by anyone. His weapons don't actually project his condiments at a speed fast enough to do anyone harm, but they sure are inconvenient, leaving nasty stains in your superhero costume. On the other hand, he does potentially have the ability to be able to cause anaphylactic shock if he is battling someone with an allergy, right? Number 3. Monsieur Mallah and the Brain. Monsieur Mallah is described in his wiki as a militant, super-intelligent French gorilla. The Brain, on the other hand, is described as a genius French scientist and master criminal who exists as a disembodied brain. So, those two descriptions are interesting enough on their own, but when I tell you the French militant gorilla and the disembodied brain are an item together, I think that just elevates the whole thing to a different level. Together, they are the primary leaders of the Brotherhood of Evil, who were villains to both the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans. They both appeared in Doom Patrol 86 in 1964. Now, Brain was once a scientist who experimented on the gorilla who would become Mallah, which would increase Mallah's intelligence. An accident injured Ernst, and Mallah had to remove Ernst's brain and place it in a technological holding thingamajig to keep him alive and be able to communicate. The two are almost always together, with Mallah carrying around the brain. Hey, look, I don't judge. You find love where you find love, but as a concept for supervillains who lead a team of supervillains, you gotta admit, it's pretty odd to say the least. Number 2. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Let me repeat that for all those in the back who may not have heard. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, Man. I don't really have a problem with 2/3 of that. I just get really hung up on the vegetable part. Is that weird? Sven Larsson is the man who claims that title. And while it is a completely ridiculous one, it is actually pretty fitting. Sven fell victim to an experiment of his own making, which allows him to transform into any animal, vegetable, or mineral, either partially or fully, although he very obviously likes to do a bit of all three at the same time, which is an odd choice, but hey, I just work here. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man first appeared in Doom Patrol 89 in August 1964, and he is an enemy to the team, which makes sense given their weirdness. But Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man here has a vendetta against the Doom Patrol's leader, the Chief, who he believed once stole an invention of his. An invention that, funnily enough, is the only way of stopping Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. But he didn't even do that, so I don't know. Look, it gets weirder and weirder, but I gotta move on. Before I do though, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to get out of my system one more time. Number 1, Mr. Mind. I think anyone who hasn't heard of this villain before would be forgiven. When you think of the most fearsome villains, specifically the villains of Captain Marvel, otherwise known as Shazam, you may not first think about the 7-inch long sentient worm from Venus known as Mr. Mind. This diabolically evil mind-controlling worm, after the events of Infinite Crisis, would cocoon himself and then emerge as a massive monstrosity capable of manipulating reality, consuming universes, and traveling through time and space. He was described as eating years and events from this universe's history, altering the Earth with every flap of his wings. It took a combined effort from Booster Gold, Supernova, and Skeets to defeat Mr. Mind by trapping him inside Skeets' shell, which was fortified by the Suspendium. Then, Booster Gold threw Skeets through time with the help of Supernova to the day he was first discovered on Earth by Dr. Sivana, and then he is trapped in a time loop forever. So they didn't even actually end up ending him. They just trapped him. This all-powerful mind-controlling 7-inch long worm.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Captain America of the Revolutionary War, Steven Rogers. Now, this version of the character is a bit arguable of whether they're canon or not, as they were initially introduced as an ancestor of the regular Marvel Universe's Steve Rogers, but since then have been treated as an alternate universe story. Fighting on the side of the Americans during the American Revolution, this Captain America had no superpowers of his own, but was just an experienced soldier with a shield fighting against an early incarnation of the Hellfire Club. In an oddly tragic twist, however, Steven Rogers wound up dying in one of the last battles of the Revolutionary War when he was randomly struck by a stray cannonball. Not exactly the most heroic end for a Captain America, but hey, they can't all be as epic as Endgame. Coming in at number 9, we have John Walker, specifically the version seen in the Disney Plus show, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Following Sam Wilson's rejection of taking on the role of Captain America and wielding the shield following the retirement of Steve Rogers, the American government attempts to turn combat veteran John Walker into the next generation Captain America. Unfortunately, John has a whole host of undiagnosed mental issues and feelings of inadequacy, and following the death of his partner Battlestar, he violently kills a civilian while being videotaped by the whole world. And although John had seemingly calmed down enough to be on the good guys team for the season finale, it looks like his future in the MCU might just be as a Dark Avenger, something very different than what Steve Rogers originally stood for. Coming in at number 8, we have Roberta Mendez, the Captain America of the year 2099. In a possible alternate future for the Marvel Universe, Roberta was the wife of an operative for Alchemax, a giant corporation with way too much control of future civilization. Roberta was forcefully injected with the super soldier serum by her husband without her knowledge, giving her all of the abilities of Captain America, but also fracturing her mind so that she would have no memory of her own exploits as a superhero. Wielding an energy shield and wings instead of the vibranium weapons of her predecessor, this new Captain America initially fought solely for Alchemax's Avengers team, but soon began to utilize her heroics for the good of everyone and not just for a giant corporation.
Number 7. Iron Man Noir. Coming from the Noir series, Iron Man of Earth 90214 had to go all the way to Atlantis to fix his heart problem. What am I talking about? Let's find out. Tony in this reality was an industrialist adventurer. It feels like National Treasure almost. We meet Tony and the crew and they're looking for something called the Jade Mask. This mask that was said to cure any kind of ailment, so he figured, hey, it's worth a shot to fix the old Tigger. It didn't work, so some traitors then revealed themselves once the mask was found, so Tony and Rhodey escaped and returned to New York. He goes on yet another treasure hunt with Rhodey, this time to Atlantis, because he heard a rumor that this power source could also do wonders to his heart, maybe, perhaps. Tony gets the trident and again he gets betrayed. Zemo and his forces were strong enough to kidnap Pepper, and Tony and Rhodes need a new plan. They travel to Zemo's castle, and it's then that it's revealed that Zemo is actually Tony's father, brainwashed by Strucker. And he was also equipped with Iron Man suits because action and adventure. As far as Noir storylines go, Iron Man isn't my favorite, but the whole Nathan Drake vibe that Tony has is still quite fun. And also, Atlantis. It's kind of weird. Dive in. Number 6. Earth X. Also known as Earth 9997, this version of Iron Man hit the pages back in Earth X issue 0. This time around, the human race is at risk due to the release of Terrigen mists. So Tony decides, you know what, I'm just going to isolate myself, not being sure how the mist would react, which is a fair point. So in turn, he would wear his armor all the time, then eventually he made an Iron Manor in New York. Super cautious, you know, with today's stuff going on, you can't really blame him. He went even further when he decided it was best to create his own team, the Iron Avengers. Guy was super paranoid. So eventually Galactus did come along, so Tony used his Iron Manor and distracted the Celestials beforehand. Now during this, Tony lost his life. Some wreckage impaled him, and for the first time in a while, Tony was able to breathe open air. How, you ask? Well, he died, and his soul immediately went to the realm of the dead, and that's when Captain Marvel's soul recruited him for an army set to take on death. Which is, first of all, nuts, because even after you die in Marvel Comics, you can't just chill out in heaven. You have to go fight another war immediately. Come on. But Death did eventually die, and that's when Tony got another huge upgrade in Paradise. Using the High Evolutionary's devices, Tony was changed into this angelic being, of course, still with wings. And he looked like Iron Man, so that's fun. You can customize your own angel outfit once you get up there. That's good to know. Number 5. Tony Doom. Since What If is currently dropping weekly episodes on Disney Plus, we have to mention one of the more wild issues. What if Tony Stark had become Dr. Doom? It would probably be pretty bad. Yeah, yes it is. So here in the storyline that both of them go to the same college instead of Reed Richards being Victor's roommate. So now it's Tony. Two geniuses in one dorm. Sounds like they would make dreams come true, but in reality it was a living nightmare waiting to happen. Doom tricked Tony into switching bodies Freaky Friday style. And on top of that, Tony's memories were also wiped. So Tony, in Doom's body, gets in heat for the experiment, and in turn, he gets sent back to Latveria. Meanwhile, Doom is in line to take over Stark Industries. He still is Tony Stark, so down the road, Doom Industries was now a competitor to Stark Industries. He's brilliant in any way. The pair end up creating their own armors. Of course, Tony builds a red and gold Doom armor, while Doom makes a green and gray Iron Man armor. I'll give you a second to absorb that. There we go. It's a fun little swap with good action, but it's a little bit too confusing of a Freaky Friday type plot. But it's worth a shot. Go give it a try. Number 4. Dead Man Walking. We look now over to Fantastic Four: The End, released in 2007. Most of Tony's story here was the same, but during the Mutant Wars, Tony lost his life. Now he didn't get redirected to a paradise where he would then become an Iron Man themed angel. Instead, he uploaded his subconsciousness into an AI. So now he lives through his armors, just swapping back and forth, walking around, which sounds like a solution, I guess, but living forever? Come on, Tony, I don't think that's a way to go, really. Number 3. Steel Corpse. Tony and his suit have always been so close. It's had its back many times, sometimes even acting for itself and making a judgment call. Like in Iron Man 3, it literally woke Tony up from a nightmare aggressively. We love that future tech. But in the Age of X storyline, the suit literally has his back as Tony and the suit begin to merge. Ugh, I'm itchy just reading this. This started right after a virus began taking its toll on Tony. He was rapidly declining health-wise, so we chose a more fitting name, Steel Corpse, to be kind of funny, but also he looks like a corpse, so he's like, I'm just gonna admit it. He, alongside other, much healthier Avengers, were tasked to take down mutants, but when the gang got there, they of course opted to save them instead. Superhero twist of logic, we love it. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board with this new plan, and it started to act out by itself. It still wanted to save the day, although this was not the right way to do it. Captain America had no choice but to end the life of Steel Corpse in order to save the mutants. Number 2. Iron Goblin. Making his first appearance in the Spider Island series, Iron Goblin wasn't made through any reality warping or anything like that. Instead, this happens during the Resistance assault on Spider-Queen, which is sounding crazier than what I just said. Tony Stark ends up getting captured and infected with the spider virus. He's going nuts at this point, so the rest of the heroes try and snap him out of it by using Goblin Formula, which is a solution, I guess. I don't know, read a book, read a comic book, Avengers. Something bad's gonna happen. So we went from being a spider monster to Iron Goblin. Pretty crazy 24 hours for Tony. Tony was still Tony after this point though, despite the evil green look on his face. Like he even said Norman stole his armor before, so he was just evening it out. Haha, he's funny, he's still Tony, nice. But as time went by, every minute that passed, that formula started to in fact change Tony. Like for example, he was flying around on the glider, although he can fly with his suit. It's not looking good. He knew he was going insane, so he sacrificed himself when the Queen's army attacked. Still a hero nonetheless, although he's mean and green and throwing pumpkin bombs. And finally, number 1, Iron Hammer. Coming from Warp World, Iron Hammer, aka Stark Odinson, first came to life in issue 3 of Infinity Wars. So when Gamora had the Infinity Stones, she trapped everybody's soul in the Soul Gem, and then folded the universe in half, which resulted in all of our heroes merging together. Pretty fun. So rightfully referred to as Warp World, we soon get to meet Soldier Supreme, Ghost Panther, Weapon Hex, and Iron Hammer. Stark Odinson in this pocket universe is the son, of course, of Howard Odin, chieftain of Asgard. He has the Iron Hammer armor, and of course he has a massive literal hammer of the gods to get the message across. Being a combination of both, he can face powerful villains like Stain Odinson, who is a blend of Loki and Obadiah Stane, and even Madam Hell, one of the coolest looking versions definitely, and also one of the more powerful. A great note to end on.
Number 10. Kraven the Spider Hunter. We know on Earth 8 there is a Spider Woman who happens to resemble Kraven somewhat, but did you know that on Earth 31 there actually is a Sergei Kravinoff who simply is Spider-Man? Yep, Kraven is known as Hunter Spider, who after being exposed to a giant spider's spider venom while hunting a lion in Zimbabwe, became himself a spider-themed hero. Hunter Spider specifically focuses on hunting spider-themed villains in New York City. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, if you love it when we talk about alternate spider folks, be sure to let us know by clicking that subscribe button. I know there's a bunch of you out there that aren't subscribed, and if that's who you are, maybe subscribe. It's a nice thing to do. Helps us out. Number 9. Spider. Spider. Penny Parker's story is really just strange. I mean, even her superhero name is pretty strange. SP//DR. Penny Parker hails from the reality of Earth 14512. Here she pilots a mech that is connected to her through her genes and a spider bite. The spider bite connects her to the suit, as the spider that bit her actually makes up half of the mech suit known as Spider's CPU. In her alternate reality, she also has a rival in Addie Brock, who ends up as the pilot of the mech suit known as Venom, or as it's spelled there, VEN#M, or £, if you prefer. Penny is weird in the sense that a lot of her story, while still echoing the canon, feels like such a fresh take on the origin of Spider-Man, which is also why I love it. Number 8. The Spider. On Earth 15, Spider-Man is the exact opposite of a hero. He is a villain, a criminal, and one of the most extreme kinds of criminals, a serial killer. He merged with a symbiote that is basically Carnage to become the Spider. His sense of humor is extremely dark, and he actually takes joy in hurting others. Despite joining the Timebreakers, the Spider later tries to take over multiple different universes and ends up being killed during his attempt. So while he is really creepy and disturbing, at least he's gone now, or at least he's gone for now. The Spider was one of the characters and teammates that appeared in Exiles, making his first appearance in the 2001 Exiles series in issue number 12, but eventually was killed in issue number 44. While we know about Peter Parker and his role as the Spider on Earth 15 as a serial killer with a symbiotic suit, we don't really know anything else about his home reality, so yeah, I wonder if all the other heroes are also villains there. Number 7. Spider Bite. I am so happy that I get to talk about Spider Bite. She was actually my favorite spider-themed hero to appear in the Vault of Spiders comic, and she's also definitely a weirdo in the best of ways. She hails from a world where people actually spend most of their time online as avatars, which is pretty weird. Spider Bite is actually Margot's avatar, or one of them, rather, that she wears in the digital space. She fights to protect people in cyberspace by donning her Spider Bite persona and apprehending cyber criminals. Seriously though, how cool would it be if we actually had a hero like this on, the internet, on cyberspace? Although this might seem like a strange reality to some, the cool thing about Spider Bite is it kind of feels like she could exist in our own future. I mean, already people spend a lot of time online, and we have things like VR, Oculus, and even digital land. So this could very well be our own future. Honestly, we maybe need some vigilantes on the internet.
Number 6. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Look, I talked about Bat-Mite when discussing heroes, and he wasn't even really a hero, so how can I not mention the first 5th dimensional imp in this video? Plus he's got a fun name. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a reality warping imp obsessed with Superman, who, just like his rival Bat-Mite did with Batman, simply seeks to annoy the hell out of Superman and just prove he is smarter than him. Which is good, because he has a level of power that in other hands could cause the entire end of the multiverse. More on that later though. He can do almost anything imaginable if he wishes it, and his only weakness really is being convinced or tricked into saying his name backwards to send him back to the 5th dimension, which, if you're trying to say it correctly, is honestly a superpower in and of itself. Clitopizixum. I got it. Number 5. Emperor Joker. Mr. Mxyzptlk has an extreme level of power, like I said. Also, like I said, if this power fell into the wrong hands, it could be potentially reality ending. Now, what hands could be worse than the psychotic hands of Batman's arch nemesis, the Joker? Well, that's exactly who gets the power in the Emperor Joker storyline. Mr. Mix gets bored and wants to give Joker 1% of his power, just to see the tricks Joker is able to pull pull off. But instead, the Joker tricks Mr. Mxyzptlk into giving him 99.9% of his power instead. Joker uses this power to rewrite all of reality to become his sick, twisted dream world. He eats the whole population of China out of a Chinese food container box. He keeps everyone stuck in a time loop, including Batman, who he introduces to the afterlife over and over every day forever. Oh, and he also turned Flash into a slow-moving Abyss Man. Superman, the Spectre, and Mr. Mxyzptlk, being the only ones who can remember the former world, tried to do something about this all-powerful Joker. But that's just the problem. He is all-powerful. He destroys all of reality, but he can't bring himself to destroy Batman fully. And because of this, he loses control of his power, allowing the Spectre and Mr. Mix to steal it back and fix all of reality. This story it's pretty nuts. Number 4, Condiment King. When the villainous Condiment King came on the scene, it was literally on the scene, as he appeared in the animated Batman TV show from 1992. One of the best, honestly. Condiment King was Buddy Stantler, a comedian who was brainwashed by the Joker into becoming a villain who wields condiment squirters and viciously horrible puns. I knew you'd catch up to me sooner or later. How I've relished this meeting. Come, Batman, let's see if you can cut the mustard. Diabolical stuff like that. The puns get even worse in the comics, with his real name becoming a pun on its own. Mitchell Mayo. He isn't taken seriously by anyone. His weapons don't actually project his condiments at a speed fast enough to do anyone harm, but they sure are inconvenient, leaving nasty stains in your superhero costume. On the other hand, he does potentially have the ability to be able to cause anaphylactic shock if he is battling someone with an allergy, right? Number 3, Monsieur Mallah and the Brain. Monsieur Mallah is described in his wiki as a militant, super-intelligent French gorilla. The Brain, on the other hand, is described as a genius French scientist and master criminal who exists as a disembodied brain. So, those two descriptions are interesting enough on their own, but when I tell you the French militant gorilla and the disembodied brain are an item together, I think that just elevates the whole thing to a different level. Together, they are the primary leaders of the Brotherhood of Evil, who were villains to both the Doom Patrol and the Teen Titans. They both appeared in Doom Patrol 86 in 1964. Now, Brain was once a scientist who experimented on the gorilla who would become Mallah, which would increase Mallah's intelligence. An accident injured Ernst, and Mallah had to remove Ernst's brain and place it in a technological holding thingamajig to keep him alive and be able to communicate. The two are almost always together, with Mallah carrying around the brain. Hey, look, I don't judge. You find love where you find love, but as a concept for supervillains who lead a team of supervillains, you gotta admit it's pretty odd to say the least. Number 2, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Let me repeat that for all those in the back who may not have heard. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral, Man. I don't really have a problem with 2/3 of that. I just get really hung up on the vegetable part. Is that weird? Sven Larsson is the man who claims that title. And while it is a completely ridiculous one, it is actually pretty fitting. Sven fell victim to an experiment of his own making, which allows him to transform into any animal, vegetable, or mineral, either partially or fully, although he very obviously likes to do a bit of all three at the same time, which is an odd choice, but hey, I just work here. Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man first appeared in Doom Patrol 89 in August 1964, and he is an enemy to the team, which makes sense given their weirdness. But Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man here has a vendetta against the Doom Patrol's leader, the Chief, who he believed once stole an invention of his. An invention that, funnily enough, is the only way of stopping Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. But he didn't even do that, so I don't know. Look, it gets weirder and weirder, but I gotta move on. Before I do though, Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to get out of my system one more time. Number 1, Mr. Mind. I think anyone who hasn't heard of this villain before would be forgiven. When you think of the most fearsome villains, specifically the villains of Captain Marvel, otherwise known as Shazam, you may not first think about the 7-inch long sentient worm from Venus known as Mr. Mind. This diabolically evil mind-controlling worm, after the events of Infinite Crisis, would cocoon himself and then emerge as a massive monstrosity capable of manipulating reality, consuming universes, and traveling through time and space. He was described as eating years and events from this universe's history, altering the Earth with every flap of his wings. It took a combined effort from Booster Gold, Supernova, and Skeets to defeat Mr. Mind by trapping him inside Skeets' shell, which was fortified by the Suspendium. Then, Booster Gold threw Skeets through time with the help of Supernova to the day he was first discovered on Earth by Dr. Sivana, and then he is trapped in a time loop forever. So they didn't even actually end up ending him. They just trapped him. This all-powerful mind-controlling 7-inch long worm.
Coming in at number 10, we have the undead Doctor Strange from the Marvel Zombies universe. While this version of Stephen Strange was able to avoid the initial outbreak of the zombie virus that destroyed their version of Earth, he was eventually tragically bitten and converted into a member of the undead army while defending a dimensional doorway that would have allowed the zombie swarm to invade and infest other realities. The newly zombified Doctor Strange now uses this doorway to peer through the alternate worlds of the Marvel multiverse and find ideal worlds for the zombie invasion to begin anew, making this a very weird but also very dangerous interpretation of Doctor Strange. Coming in at number 9, we have the Soldier Supreme, a very odd combination of Doctor Strange and the Punisher. On an alternate Earth where vampires have killed most of the world's heroes and converted much of the normal population, one of the few vigilantes remaining is Frank Castle. Possessed by the spirit and knowledge of Dr. Stephen Strange as a last-ditch effort to save this reality, the Punisher and the Sorcerer Supreme combined into a single vampire-slaying enemy, turning the Punisher's violent tendencies into the last defense against an unstoppable vampire army. Coming in at number 8, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Doctor Strange, aka Stephen Strange Jr. In the Ultimate Marvel Universe, this version of Doctor Strange that we're introduced to is actually the son of a more traditional interpretation of the character. Following in his father's footsteps, Stephen Strange Jr. eventually becomes the Sorcerer Supreme following his dad's disappearance. But the odd part that gets him on this list is unfortunately his over-the-top and needlessly nasty death. During the Ultimatum event, a highly controversial storyline in which Magneto wiped out millions of lives and resulted in dozens of over-the-top and edgy deaths for many Marvel heroes, Doctor Strange had his head popped like a literal balloon by Dormammu possessing his cloak. Most people dislike this event because of how deliberately edgy it tried to be, and with an anticlimactic death like this, it's really not hard to see why. I mean, his cloak? Really? At number 7, we have Ultimate Captain America, a character that probably wasn't intended to be read as weird when first created, but has since turned out to be a bit more of a unique interpretation of the character. Notably more destructive, assertive, and just a bit grumpier than most other interpretations of Steve Rogers, he could be seen as a different interpretation of American patriotism than more classical versions of the character take from. In another wild and tragic twist, this Cap's version of Red Skull is actually his literal son, the result of his last night with his World War II era girlfriend, Gail Richards. Completely unknown about by Steve and born after he was frozen in ice, the baby was taken by the military and grew up in foster care. Growing up with an inferiority complex, this child would eventually scar himself and become the criminal mastermind, the Red Skull. Talk about a messed up family, Steve. Coming in at number 6, it's Steve Rogers. No wait, it's Stephen Strange. No wait again, it's actually Steven Rogers, Soldier Supreme. In a pocket dimension known as Warp World, where every soul of the Marvel Universe has been merged with that of another, Doctor Strange and Captain America were DNA digivolved into the combined form of the Soldier Supreme. In this unique part of the multiverse, the superhuman experiments done by the Allies during World War II were achieved through magic instead of science, with the weak and scrawny Steven Rogers being taught the ways of dark magic and learning powerful sorcery. With a best friend known as Bucky Wong, a literal Winter Soldier after he becomes a ghost, this combo of characters is definitely a standout in a multiverse full of standouts. At number 5, we've got the alternate future showstopper of Danielle Cage, the Captain America of the future. The grown-up child of both Jessica Jones and Luke Cage on Earth 15061, Danielle has taken up the mantle of Captain America in a Manhattan where climate change makes flooding incredibly frequent and gangs roam the streets. With her own arch nemesis in the form of the Golden Skull, Danielle Cage is also one of the physically strongest Captain Americas throughout the multiverse, inheriting both the strength-based power sets of her parents and letting her yeet that red and blue shield as hard as it's ever been thrown before. Coming in at number 4, we've got a bit of a change of rank with Colonel America, aka Zombie Cap. In a world where an infected sentry brings a zombie plague from beyond the stars, and also where Steve Rogers has achieved the rank of Colonel and the presidency of the United States, America's hero is bitten along with many of the Avengers when they try to contain the sentry situation. The Colonel is even the one to eventually bite Spider-Man on the shoulder when the younger hero tries to help. This zombified version of Steve Rogers retains all of his powers and more, surviving with half of his brain exposed until he was finally defeated by his enemy the Red Skull during a final battle over who gets to devour the corpse of Galactus. Definitely some very, very weird stuff. At number 3, we've got another character with a Dragon Ball Z style fusion in the form of Clark Kent, the Super Soldier. And no, this didn't suddenly switch over to a DC Comics themed video. In the Amalgam universe, where the Marvel and DC multiverses have been compressed and combined into one unified world by the megaversal beings known as the Brothers, Super Soldier is the result of mixing the backstories of both Captain America and Superman. Clark Kent is a young man from Kansas who winds up receiving his powers of strength, heat vision, and flight not from being a Kryptonian, but by volunteering for the Super Soldier program to help America during the Second World War, a process which is spied on by a very mischievous Jimmy Olsen. He would go on to fight the leader of Hydra, a version of Lex Luthor, and Super Metallo, a combination of Metallo and Red Skull's usual brand of killer robots. Double the trouble, double the fun. Coming in at number 2, we've got a version of Captain America that doesn't even need America. That's right, it's Captain Avalon. Coming from a Marvel universe inspired by classic sword and sorcery fantasy, this version of Cap is merely called Stevan until his son, funnily enough named Stevan Jr., is kidnapped by the Dreadlord, an evil alternate version of Baron Zemo. While he doesn't appear to have any actual magical abilities or equivalents to the Super Soldier formula, Captain Avalon is a brave knight at the peak of human condition, and his red and blue shield still brings the core of this classic character to light, even if America doesn't really exist in this Game of Thrones style world. And finally, coming in at the top spot for our weirdest alternate versions of Captain America, we have a choice that's not even human. That's right, it's Captain Americat. Hailing from Earth 8311, the very same world that's home to the spectacular Spider-Ham, this version of Cap is named Steven Mouser, leads a group of superpowered animals known as the Scavengers, and in another groan-inducing animal pun, most notably led them into battle against the supervillain Moltron. While his appearances have mostly been related to side stories compared to Spider-Ham's main adventures, Captain Americat is definitely the oddest version of Steve Rogers that we've yet to see in the Marvel Multiverse.
Number 10, Gorgon. If you remember the weirdest DC Multiverse Superheroes video, which you should check out, I talked about a pastiche of the Incredible Hulk in DC Comics called Big Baby from Earth 8. He was part of a team called the Retaliators, who were supposed to be a joke version of the Avengers. This universe also had a team of villains called the Extremists, and on that team was a Dr. Octopus type character named Gorgon. While Gorgon did utilize technological enhancements, I think his octopus likeness comes in the form of his prehensile hair. The hair tentacles he uses, and his role as a scientist, mixed with his weight and oddly familiar glasses, all come together to really evoke a Dr. Octopus likeness, which is just weird enough to make me double take. He is also familiar enough that I can't really put him any higher on this list, so there's that. Number 9, Dex Star. Or Dexstar, or Dexter, or Dexstar, Dexstarer. Cats can be ruthless, cold, and scary at times, I'll admit that. But while the Red Lantern of Sector 2814, Dexstar, is an irrationally rage-filled kitty, it's all because he loved his owner. Dexstar's origin shows the cat Dexter with his owner when she is attacked by robbers who broke into her home. While Dexter tried his best to scratch the attacker, he ended up ending the life of Dexter's owner. When the police showed up on the scene, Dexter was kicked out into the streets so as to not contaminate the scene. Now, 2 rascals from the streets found Dexter monster when he was trying to sleep, put him in a sack, and threw him into a river. Now that is one hell of a sequence of events, and all this happening filled the poor little kitty with enough rage that it caught the attention of Atrocitus, who called out to him and made him a Red Lantern. With this newfound power of the Red Lantern ring, the Rage Kitty exacted his sweet revenge on the hoodlums and flew to say goodbye to his owner one last time, saying, in his little cat language, "I find who hurt you, I kill. I, good kitty." I love this cat, but I also wouldn't dare mess with it. Ever. Number 8. Prometheus. Heroes and villains with no powers always seem to be some of the most powerful. It's strange. Take Prometheus. After seeing his criminal parents pass at the hands of police, he vows a vendetta on any form of justice. A vendetta that would push him to be able to defeat the whole Justice League single-handedly. He shot the Martian Manhunter with a dart that turned his power against him and set him on fire. He infected Steel's armor with a computer virus which commanded the suit to damage the Watchtower. He hypnotized the Huntress into unconsciousness. He attacked Green Lantern with a neural chaff that rendered his ring useless. He trapped the Angel Zariel in limbo. He tricked the Flash into believing that he had planted motion-sensitive devices that would explode if the Flash used his powers. And he defeated Batman in hand-to-hand combat. That's probably the most nuts thing on this list. His origin is very similar to Batman's. After his parents were dispatched from the mortal plane, he would travel the globe training and becoming the ultimate combat machine. But he also attended the top universities, learning as much as he could. He eventually sets up a base in the Ghost Zone, and from here, he built an armor that could download information on any opponent's fighting style, kind of reminiscent of Taskmaster's ability. He is kind of crazy capable, and his vendetta on any kind of justice plus his Batman likeness just makes him kind of a little strange to me, but also terrifying. Number 7. Earth-17 Superman. On Earth-17, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe, Overman, was the first, with the other superheroes being spawns of his DNA. Now that may be weird, but that ain't the weird part. He also doesn't really seem like a villain yet, does he? Well, after contracting a disease, contracting a disease from another person, yes, like that kind of disease, he goes insane and destroys the Justice League and reduces his world to rubble. He then gets his filthy paws on a doomsday boom boom that he intends to use on Earth-17 and wipe it out. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, just like DC tried to destroy such a naughty Superman story, even having different iterations of Overmans who were different, like an Overman who became allied with the Axis powers in World War II. But the internet never forgets DC Comics, and people like me exist to remind everyone of the things you published into this world. I am sorry, sort of. Thanks for the content.
Number 6, Mr. Fantastic. So, Mr. Fantastic in this story is still Reed Richards, but he's also Dr. Doom. Let me explain. In issue number 6 of the 1997 What If series, we get to explore an alternate world where the Fantastic Four were granted different powers. These powers seem to have been inspired more by their personality traits. As such, Reed Richards becomes a big brain. Literally, he's just a brain. Instead of him staying as a big disembodied brain though, with mental or psionic capacities, if you will, he ends up being convinced by Dr. Doom to go with him so that Doom might help him by using his knowledge of robotics to build him a humanoid body. You know that when Doom is like, please, let me help you, Reed Richards. That's not what's about to happen. In reality, Doom's plan is to use Reed's powerful brain form to power his time travel machine. The Fantastic Four come to save Reed and a battle ensues, eventually resulting in a massive explosion when Doom attempts to activate his machine. Just as the explosion goes off though, Reed manages to use his mental brain powers to move his mind into Doom's body. As a result, Doom, which I assume moves into Reed's brain form, ends up dead, and Reed lives on, but within the scarred body of Dr. Doom. So now it just looks like Doom is leading the FF. Pretty cool, but also pretty weird. Number 5, Space Admiral Von Strucker. In the What If story from issue number 14 of the 1977 series, we answer the question, what if Sergeant Fury had fought World War II in outer space? Turns out that events would be as expected, pretty weird. The whole premise is that on this alternate Earth, humans got to space a lot sooner and ended up being pulled into a conflict where they fought against the Baytans. Strucker himself was an admiral. Strucker would end up on the side of humanity, but would ultimately betray humankind and Earth to ally himself with the Baytans. He saw an opportunity for Germany, who he was more loyal to than, just Earth in general, even though, Germany's part of Earth, so I feel like maybe an interesting choice on his part. Basically, he believed that if the Baytans took over as their allies, Germany would be in a better place than they were now, so he decided to betray his fellow space soldiers, which actually I guess kinda does make sense considering everything that happened after World War I. Space wars are always fun and weird though, and this story and its antagonists are, of course, no exception. Number 4. Hypnofish. The Hypnofish that appears in What If issue number 1 from the 1977 series is actually a character that has appeared in the main continuity. A character? A type of fish? Whether there is only a single Hypnofish or more than one. This is a character who has only made a few appearances in even the main continuity since their first 616 appearance in 1963 in Fantastic Four issue number 14. But they also appear as Namor the Submariner's villainous ally in the first What If issue, where we answer the question, what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four? The end result is that Namor successfully uses his Hypnofish friend to kidnap Sue Storm, but instead of being rescued as she was in issue number 14 of FF, she ends up staying with Namor and ultimately becoming his queen. All because Spider-Man is on the team, which leaves her kind of feeling like isolated from them. In the end, his Hypnofish and Mentofish plot is successful, and Sue chooses to remain with Namor. Also, yes, there are also Mentofish. That's a thing too. An even more rare thing than Hypnofish, I believe. Number 3. Loki, Prince of Jotunheim. Another one of my favorite episodes from Marvel's and Disney Plus's What If series, for just how lighthearted and adorable it was one that asked the question, what if Thor were an only child? The answer was that Thor would basically be kind of a well-loved brat who is obsessed with partying as opposed to heroics. Not only did we get Party Thor in this episode though, we also got friendly frost giant Loki, who is also known of course as the Prince of Jotunheim. Instead of Loki being adopted by Odin and growing up to be the villain we normally know him as, the sort of jealous and vengeful brother of Thor, he becomes Thor's best friend and ally, who also seems to enjoy a good party. And I gotta say, I kinda love it. Super weird and super great. Number 2. Galactus. Galactus is a pretty complex character. Sometimes he's a villain, at times he's been a hero. Currently I'm pretty sure in the main continuity he's dead and his corpse is maybe being used as part of Thor's throne room, but either way, when it comes down to it, despite being a cosmic inevitability, Galactus often threatens entire worlds with his hunger, which, it feels pretty villainous. And yet even he can end up with a happy ending where he gets to enjoy the simple life. All it takes is for Thanos to use the Infinity Gauntlet to wipe his mind and send him to Earth to live as a human. Hey, it's so easy. In this story, this attempt to neutralize Galactus results in him being recognized despite his amnesia as Elvis. This is because Galen in his human form happens to sound and look just like Elvis coincidentally. When Adam Warlock finds him after defeating Thanos and offers to return Galactus to his prior form and power, he actually refuses and decides to live out his days on Earth with his new partner Gertrude and her son, basically filling in as the planet's, Elvis replacement following the mysterious death of the real Elvis. Which, fair enough. If I came to Earth and then people thought I was Elvis, I'd probably be like, you know what, I think I'm good, I'll just chill here, this is a pretty good life. Number 1. Juggernaut. In this bizarre What If issue, we ask the question, what if Professor X of the X-Men had become the Juggernaut? Which is a strange question and is also a great question. Obviously, instead of his brother Kane Marco. Obviously, who is normally the Juggernaut. This story takes place in the pages of issue 13 of the 1989 What If series. Here we see that Professor X is trapped under the rubble of the caved-in tomb where Sidorak's gem awaited an avatar. So Charles becomes the avatar of Sidorak and not only gains great physical power, but has his psychic mutant power basically increased as well. Because he was not around to form the X-Men, the Fantastic Four fight against Magneto in their place, which causes anti-mutant hysteria as a result. In response, when Juggernaut surfaces, he creates his own team of mutants to enforce anti-human laws in response. Woo! Becoming a powerful villain as opposed to friend and ally of humankind. Would have gone a lot differently.
And at 10, Poison. Poisons are a species of crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen. Originally Originating on Earth 17952, the poison spent an unknown amount of time as prey for larger, stronger creatures before discovering that they could assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. Poison Captain Marvel was the poison who assimilated venomized Captain Marvel of Earth 81622. Poison Captain Marvel attacked D-Man and Rage on Manhattan Bridge alongside Poison Killer Thrill, Poison Hyperion, Poison Gamora, and Poison Thing in order to attract more powerful heroes. Kind of a burn. This attack led to the creation of Poison D-Man, Poison Rage, and Poison Thor. However, this poison most likely died along with the others when the Queen was killed by the time-displaced Jean Grey. And at 9, Imposter. Part of a training program with the intent of eventually replacing Earth's heroes, this Skrull was permanently turned into a copy of the Kree warrior Mar-Vell, to avoid any possible detection. However, a problem emerged when the real Mar-Vell died. So this Skrull was no longer useful in the training program, and he couldn't really return to his true form, preventing him from returning to his normal life. However, he wasn't just going to lie down and die, so the Skrull allied himself with 2 other Skrulls in the same situation, posing as the deceased heroes of John Proudstar and Adam Warlock. After some time, they had a run-in with Kitty Pryde, who they mistook for her Skrull imposter and then took prisoner. But realizing that she was the real deal and that Galactus was about to arrive, they let her go and joined forces with her and Wolverine in an attempt to save their people and the X-Men. The Skrull was ultimately gunned down by another Skrull when he attempted to stop a Skrull general from keeping people from getting on board a spaceship, I'm guessing to evacuate. And it ate Rogue. When Rogue touched Ms. Marvel to absorb her powers, Carol grabbed onto her arm and didn't let go. So in addition to Carol's Kree DNA glitching up Rogue's powers, the prolonged contact caused each to end up absorbing the powers, memories, and personality of the others. They kinda swapped places. Rogue sought out Professor X's help, and afterwards she was sent to space as a consequence of an encounter with Brood. Rogue and Carol Danvers were briefly visited by Carol's counterpart from the Prime Marvel universe using the powers of the Reality Stone, since the gem links her to the other wielders of the gem in other realities, and they can all kind of like communicate, with the wielder of this Earth being Anna Marie. They talked about the differences between their lines before the visiting Carol was pulled to Earth 70875. But yeah, Rogue having Carol Danvers' powers, that's actually pretty weird.
Number 7, Earth X. James Howlett from Earth 9997, and here he's actually not a mutant, he's pure human. We learned that Wolverine's ancestors were actually a group of early humans known as the Moon Clan. What happened was when the first celestial host arrived, it blocked out the moon, and the moon, to the Moon Clan, I mean, they worshipped the thing, so when it disappeared, so did they. They ducked out in a cave, they weren't sure what was going on, but they wanted no part of it. They were one of the few links of humanity that weren't manipulated by the Celestials. So Logan's natural DNA was now able to evolve, growing into his abilities like enhanced senses, bone claws, healing factors, all the good stuff. So when Charles recruited him into the X-Men, he might have been aware that Logan isn't truly a mutant. So next time there's a lunar eclipse, I'm gonna go hide in a cave somewhere up north. You know, just to see what happens. Number 6, Days of Future Past. In the Age of Ultron comic, we see again a dark future where the Avengers are getting whooped. Ultron is using Vision as a conduit from the future, like the world's most painful game of telephone, and the Avengers don't really see a way to get Ultron to stop, so they send Sue Storm and Logan back in time to find a solution. Now, Logan's solution was to just straight up kill Hank Pym to make sure Ultron isn't created. But in doing so, this opened a dark alternate future, so when they go back to this new timeline they've created, the Kree-Skrull Wars now move to Earth, and they run into the Defenders of that timeline, and also Logan of that timeline. That's a lot of Logans in one story, but is there ever enough? Really? No, never. Number 5, The Hooded Man. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 558, the Hooded Man is James Howlett from the year 2509. Now at this point, he had given up the whole Wolverine alias, and now he was calling himself the Hooded Man. Reminds me of Hawkeye when he turned into Ronin in like Endgame. We love hooded people, especially Robin Hood, he's OG. Now in this future, he alongside the Fantastic Four have formed the New Defenders. The New Defenders use the body of a deceased Galactus to travel back in time. They transported their dead world to Earth 616, now their new world. Well, it's literally called that, New World, NU World. It's an exact replica of Earth. Ted Castle and others created this knowing that our current Earth would be uninhabitable in just a mere 30 years. So the New Defenders settled here with present day Fantastic Four, but eventually Logan, aka the Hooded Man, went back to his own reality to rebuild the population with Gaia. It's gonna be really busy. That's gonna be a busy time. Number 4, Halvorine. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 4, Helverine was a fierce demon from the underworld, as if his name didn't maybe tip you off already. He first approached a man named Roger who hated Wolverine so much because he actually blamed the death of his wife on Wolverine. The demon then told Roger that if he joined the Red Right Hand, he would help him get revenge. So, sounds great, Mr. Demon, thank you so much. And then he disappeared. So he joined the organization, and he, alongside other Right Hand members, sacrificed a man and a woman in order to get the demon to come back again. The demon returned, took out those two people, and then in turn told Roger it was revenge time. All the while, Wolverine was tricked inside of a van where the founder, leader of the Red Right Hand, performed a ritual to have Helverine take over Wolverine's body. Helverine was then forced to attack all of his close friends, and as dark as this one is, I gotta say, it's one of my favorite versions of Wolverine. Maybe it's the Flaming Claws, maybe it's Maybelline, I don't know. I love him. Number 3, The End. In Wolverine The End, we see an aged Wolverine as he embarks to take down the last of the Weapon X program, all the while he's dealing with himself becoming less immortal. This 6-parter is a great gloomy time. It opens with Wolverine in the snowy landscapes of Canada, struggling to even hunt a deer. Now it hurts him to retract his claws, super arthritis ain't a joke, and now he has long white hair, and I gotta admit, watching him struggle is depressing but really entertaining. Because in this run he meets his long lost brother who has apparently been watching him for a long time, and his brother tries to make it seem like he's going to help him discover the secrets of his past, but really he's just using him to nuke Vegas. So in the end, literally the end of the end, Wolverine is holding his long lost brother's body. It's quite sad, but definitely worth a read. Bring tissues, you'll need them. Number 2, James Hudson Jr. Jimmy Hudson, okay, first appeared back in the 2010s Ultimate X issue 1, but later on in Ultimate Comics Wolverine issue 4, he was the new Wolverine. Okay, who is this guy? So Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine. So back when Logan was fighting in Iraq, he fought alongside a man named James Hudson, and they were pretty close because Logan trusted James enough to take care of his newborn son. Jimmy's last name was changed when the adoption became official, and Jimmy Jr. had no idea that he too was a mutant until his high school days. He took after his birth father even so. I mean, he was attracted to redheads, he was reckless, and of course, he was absolutely shredded. In Venomized, the Poison Hive invades Earth, and they force symbiotes to bond with various superhumans. When the X-Men helped out, Jimmy was bonded to one himself. And finally, number 1. Weapon H. Making his first appearance in Totally Awesome Hulk issue 21, Clayton Cortez was originally a Marine and former Eagle Star contractor whose team was originally hired to go after the villagers of Ujanka for sabotaging a Roxxon pipeline. Clay turned against his own men, saving lives, but he also put himself in a dark spot. He was captured and sold to Dr. Alba, head of Weapon X Batch H Division, which was this neat division that made Wolverine Hulk hybrids. Gotta love those. H Alpha was unlike the others because he wasn't recruited by Director Stryker, so he wasn't a true believer in his cause, and that Dr. Alba left more of his brain in there than the other subjects in hopes that he would train better. Okay, leave a little bit of brain left, see what happens. H Alpha had about 15 minutes to go in the incubation process when a group of mutants showed up and raided the place. So Dr. Alba released H Beta to buy time, but when H Alpha was finally done, he beheaded H Beta. And then the Hulk came in, which at the time was Amadeus Cho, and he came in to hold him back. It was just nuts. People are getting their heads cut off, there's Hulk hybrids everywhere. It's really loud, must be a really loud day. Once the Weapon X staff left, Weapon H stopped fighting, and then he jumped far away.
Number 10, Gorgon. If you remember the weirdest DC Multiverse Superheroes video, which you should check out, I talked about a pastiche of the Incredible Hulk in DC Comics called Big Baby from Earth 8. He was part of a team called the Retaliators, who were supposed to be a joke version of the Avengers. This universe also had a team of villains called the Extremists, and on that team was a Dr. Octopus type character named Gorgon. While Gorgon did utilize technological enhancements, I think his octopus likeness comes in the form of his prehensile hair. The hair tentacles he uses and his role as a scientist mixed with his weight and oddly familiar glasses all come together to really evoke a Dr. Octopus likeness, which is just weird enough to make me double take. He is also familiar enough that I can't really put him any higher on this list, so there's that. Number 9, Dex Star. Or Dex-Star, or Dexter, or Dex-Star, Dex-Starer. Cats can be ruthless, cold, and scary at times, I'll admit that. But while the Red Lantern of Sector 2814, Dex-Star, is an irrationally rage-filled kitty, It's all because he loved his owner. Dexstar's origin shows the cat Dexter with his owner when she is attacked by robbers who broke into her home. While Dexter tried his best to scratch the attacker, he ended up ending the life of Dexter's owner. When the police showed up on the scene, Dexter was kicked out into the streets so as to not contaminate the scene. Now, two rascals from the streets found Dexter when he was trying to sleep, put him in a sack, and threw him into a river. Now that is one hell of a sequence of events, and all this happening filled the poor little kitty with enough rage that it caught the attention of Atrocitus, who called out to him and made him a Red Lantern. With this newfound power of the Red Lantern ring, the Rage Kitty exacted his sweet revenge on the hoodlums and flew to say goodbye to his owner one last time, saying, in his little cat language, "I find who hurt you, I kill. I, good kitty." I love this cat, but I also wouldn't dare mess with it. Ever. Number 8. Prometheus. Heroes and villains with no powers always seem to be some of the most powerful. It's strange. Take Prometheus. After seeing his criminal parents pass at the hands of police, he vows a vendetta on any form of justice. A vendetta that would push him to be able to defeat the whole Justice League single-handedly. He shot the Martian Manhunter with a dart that turned his power against him and set him on fire. He infected Steel's armor with a computer virus which commanded the suit to damage the Watchtower. He hypnotized the Huntress into unconsciousness. He attacked Green Lantern with a neural chaff that rendered his ring useless. He trapped the Angel Zariel in limbo. He tricked the Flash into believing that he had planted motion-sensitive devices that would explode if the Flash used his powers. And he defeated Batman in hand-to-hand combat. That's probably the most nuts thing on this list. His origin is very similar to Batman's. After his parents were dispatched from the mortal plane, he would travel the globe training and becoming the ultimate combat machine. But he also attended the top universities, learning as much as he could. He eventually sets up a base in the Ghost Zone, and from here, he built an armor that could download information on any opponent's fighting style, kind of reminiscent of Taskmaster's ability. He is kind of crazy capable, and his vendetta on any kind of justice plus his Batman likeness just makes him kind of a little strange to me, but also terrifying. Number 7. Earth-17 Superman. On Earth-17, superheroes are a product of government experiments. The Superman of this universe, Overman, was the first, with the other superheroes being spawns of his DNA. Now that may be weird, but that ain't the weird part. He also doesn't really seem like a villain yet, does he? Well, after contracting a disease, contracting a disease from another person, yes, like that kind of disease, he goes insane and destroys the Justice League and reduces his world to rubble. He then gets his filthy paws on a doomsday boom boom that he intends to use on Earth-17 and wipe it out. The Crisis on Infinite Earths destroyed this reality, just like DC tried to destroy such a naughty Superman story, even having different iterations of Overmans who were different, like an Overman who became allied with the Axis powers in World War II. But the internet never forgets DC Comics, and people like me exist to remind everyone of the things you published into this world. I am sorry, sort of. Thanks for the content.
Number 6. Doppelganger. Doppelganger is known for being one of the most vicious and evil spider people out there. He was actually created initially during the Infinity War event by the evil version of Adam Warlock, known as Magus. During that event, many different heroes had to fight against their evil alternate selves or fight against the evil alternate versions of fellow heroes and friends. Doppelganger was one of these, but despite being killed during Infinity War, he still managed to reappear again in the comics, returning in Maximum Carnage and wreaking havoc every time he manages to pretty much pop up, which happens actually surprisingly often when you consider how many times in different ways he's actually died over the years, but he's still kicking. Number 5. Ghost Spider. I feel like some people are going to be offended by some of the spider folks I'm calling weird on this list, but I would like to take this time to remind you that weird doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, weird to me usually tends to be a good thing. Usually, weird to me just means something that is extreme or unique in some way, something that stands out. And standing out, honestly, it can be quite a good thing. In fact, in Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider's case, I feel like her being weird is a big part of the reason why I love her character, and why I think a lot of us love her character. In almost every other universe, Gwen Stacy tragically dies, and is actually a huge part of a staple canon event for most Peter Parkers or Spider-Men out there. But in her home reality of Earth-65, things were different. Instead of her dying, it's Peter who becomes the Lizard, and he dies. And this is surprisingly rare. There are very few realities where Gwen even gets to stay alive. Primarily, I can only think of House of M and Gwenpool's home reality off the top of my head. So in the sense of standing out, Ghost Spider truly is a lovable weirdo, as the girl that not only lived, but herself also becomes a spider-themed hero. Pretty cool. Number 4, Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of my favorite alternate versions of Spider-Man. If you thought Spider-Man was creepy, wait till you meet this guy. Patton Parnell is the Spider-Man of Earth 51412. In this reality, Patton stands in for Peter, but instead of being a good guy, he's kinda just a creepy guy who enjoys making ants burn on the sidewalk with a magnifying glass as part of his experiments. However, Patton is likely a sadistic and creepy person because he actually has a pretty rough home life, often being mistreated by his Uncle Ted. In the end, when he receives his powers, they turn him into a monstrous, more evil spider-like creature who ends up mutating into something more monster than man. This version of Spider-Man has only ever made his first and last appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue number 4 from 2014. Though honestly, I would love to see more versions of Patton popping up around the world. It's pretty cool. Number 3, Bagman. Bagman is an interesting character. Although many of us consider him to be an alternate thanks to the costume's appearance in events like the Spider-Verse and properties like Marvel's Spider-Man, where this is one of the costumes you can roam around the city in the comics, this was only really a moment in Peter's life, at least in the main continuity of Earth 616. Bagman's origins come from the time when Peter went to Reed Richards for help with his black costume, which it turned out was actually the symbiote Venom, and after being separated from the Venom symbiote, used this outfit as a temporary replacement costume. It was made up of a fantastic suit loaned to him from Johnny Storm's The Human Torch and a paper bag, which had 2 holes cut out for eyes that he would wear over his head. Bagman's appearance throughout Spider-Verse content, however, implies that somewhere out there exists a world where Spider-Man never stopped wearing the Bagman outfit. Although, we've never visited that world, but I would love to. At least I don't think we have. Number 2, Miles Morales Animated Spider-Verse Trilogy. The Miles Morales of Into the Spider-Verse has a somewhat different origin story as we learn in the latest film in the trilogy, Across the Spider-Verse. Mild, I would say pretty mild, spoilers ahead for those who have yet to see the film, as that's the Miles we are going to be focusing on here. So we're not focusing on comic book 1610, we're going to be focusing on animated universe Miles from Earth 1610. The one from Sony's animated multiverse, if you will. But at the same time, I'm going to try and keep this more general and avoid getting too specific, so hopefully this will be quite a mild spoiler if you want to listen that won't ruin the movie for you at all. At least that's what I'm hoping. Hope I'm not ruining the movie for anyone. That would make me sad. And Across the Spider-Verse, we learn that Miles' origin is actually unique in the sense that it connects him to another reality. This is interesting and unique for his origin story and makes him more of a standout or odd, weird, you might say, character when it comes to the fact that technically he could be considered the Spider-Man of a different reality than his native one of Earth 1610. I found that very interesting, and I think it makes him kind of weird in a great way. In an intriguing way. Number 1, Bagman. If you thought Bagman was weird, wait till I tell you about Bagman. Yep, you heard that right. You remember Spider-Man? If you aren't familiar with her, a quick recap for you. She is an alternate reality spider-themed hero where instead of Peter Parker ending up with spider-like powers and abilities after being bitten by a radioactive spider, May Parker, his aunt, receives them instead after she was bitten while delivering a forgotten lunch to Peter while he was on a field trip at school. In this reality, May Parker is the hero known as Spider-Man, with Peter and Ben being part of her crime-fighting team and offering her support in terms of tech know-how and heart. Bagman appears as one of the alternates in the 2019 Spider-Verse comic in issue number 2 that Spider-Man reached out to get help from, reaching across the multiverse in order to defeat an evil alternate version of herself who was actually Carnage, an alternate Carnage, and an alternate May Parker. Number 10, Tales from the Dark Multiverse Batman Hush. I actually really love this story, but it's also kinda out there, especially when you consider it has its own sort of theme song and a very creepy tone. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse Hush, Bruce Wayne is the one who becomes a version of the Hush character. It would be more accurate though to say that he becomes a version of Hush and Batman if they were kinda like combined together. Here, Thomas Elliot instead becomes a rich billionaire playboy and also corrupt senator, allying himself with Talia al Ghul. He manages to make it so that Bruce Bruce was locked away in Arkham Asylum. Despite feeling slightly guilty about doing this to his childhood friend, overall Elliot is pretty okay with the way Bruce is imprisoned and treated there. However, after faking his death, Bruce Wayne manages to escape Arkham and becomes Elliot's worst nightmare. And just for a fun fact, he doesn't go by Hush in this one though, he's the Silenced. Shh. Get it? Still like Hush. Number 9. JLA the Nail. This is an Elseworld story that centers around a literal nail. The nail in question is one that punches Martha and Jonathan Kent's tire, thereby preventing them from intercepting and adopting little baby Kal-El, who would grow up to become Superman. Or at least he would have grown up to become Superman if that's what happened. In this world, instead, there is seemingly no Superman. As such, Lex Luthor is successful in making the JLA a band of outlaws. Instead of them being celebrated heroes, they're kind of considered to be somewhat criminal, despite of course their noble intentions. What I will say is at least a lot of this artwork is pretty good. Most of the limited series ends up being kinda dull, save for a few scenes and plot points. The parts that I found the most interesting were one where Selina gets therapy while sexy posing on a desk, another being a fight involving Joker with anti-grav mitts versus Batman, which takes place after Joker has successfully killed Batgirl and Robin. Batman ends up broken as a result of the Joker's actions here. We later learn that the Superman of this universe is basically a very sensitive Jimmy Olsen who is bonded with the remaining traces of Kal-El's DNA found in this crash-landed spaceship. Jimmy doesn't like it when people laugh at him. He ends up in a fight with the real Kal-El, another interesting part of the 3-issue series, who it turns out was adopted by the Amish, hence why he never became a hero, as he preferred to stay within his community. So we get an Amish Superman, and then we also get Jimmy Olsen Superman, but he's pretty much evil. Also, what is that costume he's wearing? Sorry Jimmy, I didn't mean to laugh at you. Sorry. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want even more multiversal tales, let us know that you love it by giving this video a thumbs up. And also let us know in the comments what other multiversal tales you have loved or you have thought are super weird, or that you loved and thought were weird. I mean, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Number 8. Tales from the Dark Multiverse, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods. I don't even know what to really make of this multiversal story. All I can tell you is buckle in because this Dark Multiverse story is, yeah, dark. To be fair to this one shot though, I don't really even know what to make of the War of the Gods story in the main continuity, which I also found a little confusing, so it makes sense that this is where I would be as well with the Dark Multiverse version. A little confused. In this story, the Amazons of Themyscira end up in a war with the United States. When Diana is pulled into a battle with Hecate as a result of these events, where in the main continuity Hecate was defeated by Wonder Woman's lasso of truth, here she just ends up planting a seed within Diana's mind. Diana defeats her, but only temporarily. Following the death of Hippolyta, her mother, Diana is left weak, fearful, alone, and resentful, and this is when Hecate is able to take over. Unable to free her, all of Wonder Woman's friends die trying to. The only way to contain Hecate Wonder Woman is with magic, and many of her magical colleagues actually die in the attempt to do so. Hecate as such ends up chained, but of course so is Diana, unable to find the hope to escape her own internal prison. Of course, like most dark multiversal tales, we end on a pretty dark and tragic note. But that's okay, Zatanna's never gonna give up!
Coming in at number 7, we have the Captain America from the Age of X event. This Captain America seemed to be mostly the same as the mainstream Marvel Universe's version, but with one clear difference. This guy hated mutants. With the Avengers serving as a team dedicated to wiping out, or at the very least capturing, all members of the X-Men and mutant kind, this version of Steve Rogers only began seeing the error of his ways after killing Mystique and realizing she was protecting a group of innocent mutant children. Horrified at what he'd been a part of, this Captain America would kill his friend Iron Man to stop the mutant slaughter, and was overall just a really weird and twisted take on a hero that usually always fights for the underdog. Coming in at number 6, we have Werewolf Captain America, an incident that actually happened to the real Steve Rogers rather than an alternate dimension counterpart. While investigating the disappearance of astronaut John Jameson alongside a slate of attacks that appeared to have been committed by a werewolf, Captain America was attacked by a mind-controlled Wolverine and knocked unconscious. Cap then found himself injected with a wolf serum by the villain Nightshade and transformed into a much furrier variant of his his usual self. Unfortunately for Nightshade, Cap's leadership qualities didn't decrease in wolf form, and he quickly organized a rebellion amongst the other werewolves, overthrowing their master and finally finding a serum that could change them all back into human form. Coming in at number 5, we have the infamous Iron Cap. In the alternate universe of the Bullet Points miniseries, in which various Marvel heroes have had their origin stories all switched around, Steve Rogers is unable to take the super soldier serum, but volunteers for an experimental exoskeleton to join the war effort. Encased in an iron suit that has to be connected to his heart, Steve Rogers becomes both a captain and Iron Man, using his newfound technology-based strength to push back against the forces of Hydra and help the Allied forces win this universe's version of World War II. Coming in at number 4, we have the Captain America from Earth 9997. In this dark alternate universe, the doctor that gave Steve Rogers the super soldier serum was actually a Hydra agent working for the Red Skull undercover, and Steve Rogers was actually chosen because of his blonde hair and blue eyes being an ideal manifestation of the Aryan race. While this Cap had a long career fighting against the forces that wound up creating him, the weirdest twist came after this Steve Rogers died in battle, falling to multiple bullets. This version of Captain America was revived by the being Mar-Vell and turned into a member of the Avenging Host, a league of angels that sought to help the people of Earth cross over to the other side following their deaths. I know Steve Rogers has always been a good man, but becoming a literal angel? Definitely a bit of weirdness going on there, Marvel. Coming in at number 3, we have Captain Colonies. Throughout the Marvel multiverse, each universe has their own member of the Captain Britain Corps, a multiversal group that bands together to take on threats that one universe alone couldn't handle. While this character was mainly just used as a one-off joke appearance, the implication of Captain Colonies is that in this world, the American Revolution never happened, and thus Steve Rogers' transformation into Captain America instead kept him being allied with the British colonies. The flag on his costume may have changed, but hopefully Steve Rogers keeps all of his usual heroics. Coming in at number 2, we have the Ape Captain America from Earth 8101. That's right, you can't have a weird alternate versions list without at least a couple animal entries, and on this alternate Earth, everyone is a primate-based version of their original forms. While Steve Rogers in this reality was merely a very intelligent gorilla, he was actually frozen in ice as an act of betrayal by the vampire Baron Blood, who took his place and misled the Avengers into starting an ape civil war. Luckily, the true gorilla Steve Rogers was eventually freed and led the Ape Vengers once more after defeating Baron Blood once and for all. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the ghostly Captain America of Earth 7116. During the war in Afghanistan, a young soldier named James Newman believes his troop is saved by the sudden appearance of Captain America. However, when he asks his squad mates about the incident, they all seem to believe that it was James that accomplished their rescue. In this universe, Captain America is lying comatose under the surveillance of the US government, but is somehow sending out his spirit to American war zones in need and possessing soldiers in order to keep them safe. This is definitely the weirdest power set that Steve Rogers has ever been depicted having, and it's honestly one of the odder interpretations of Captain America's status as a member of the US military. I mean, weird possessing soldier ghosts? You gotta draw the line somewhere, Marvel.
At number 10 is the Punch Dimension. This probably wins the award for the most uncomfortable and painful universe on this list, unless you're Cyclops, in which case it's actually probably the most useful, but still pretty painful, I'd imagine. In fact, the Punch Dimension is where Cyclops gets all of his power from, because instead of him actually generating all his power from within, his eyes are actually known to be doorways to this dimension, which he can summon kinetic energy out of on command. But if anyone else were to travel there, they'd probably die immediately. Honestly, Cyclops probably would too. To think that there's just a dimension out there that consists of pure concentrated kinetic energy and nothing else is definitely bizarre, if not terrifying. At number 9 is Marvel Noir. On Earth 90214, all of the most popular heroes get their own retellings through the lens of the 1920s and 1930s era. And although I think this is a really cool idea, some of the characters that get their own noir makeovers just come off as a bit bizarre. A few of them give me that uncanny feeling where I can't tell whether the steampunk aesthetic is really cool for them or just doesn't work as smoothly as others, like the noir Iron Man or the pirate portrayal of Namor. But overall, we do end up with Spider-Man Noir, who has become a well-known alternate version of the hero, especially after being voiced by Nicolas Cage in the Into the Spider-Verse animated film. Don't get me wrong, I actually think this universe is really cool, but it's also very weird, hence why it's made it onto this list. At number 8, we have the Pocket Universe. This one is definitely a bizarre concept that really puts things into perspective on and off the page. Franklin Richards, son of Reed Richards and the Invisible Woman, has some really powerful abilities, and in one instance in particular, he shows what he's capable of in a really impressive way. The young boy harnesses the dimensions of space, time, and reality to develop his very own universe, which he creates to be small enough to fit in his own pocket, hence the name. And although we don't see everything that goes on inside this fabricated pocket universe, we can assume that no matter what, it's gotta be a weird existence. Especially when a ball of lint in the boy's pocket is probably the size of thousands of solar systems put together. At number 7 is Marvel 1602. This is a fun one, but it's definitely quite bizarre at the same time. It might be pretty obvious by the name, but basically, this universe tells the stories of the heroes and villains we know today as if they lived in the 1600s. With Count Otto von Doom ruling a medieval Latveria, heroes like Matthew Murdock, a blind mercenary for hire, and Peter Parquois, an orphan recruited by Sir Nicholas Fury, have to put a stop to him. Another bizarre thing about this world is that mutants aren't seen as superheroes and aren't part of a team called the X-Men, but are instead known as witch breeds, and they are hunted down systematically by anyone who will dare challenge them. It's definitely a fun world to explore, but it sort of gives me the creeps as well.
Number 6, Spider-Boy. What happens when you take Connor Kent's Superboy and mix him with Peter Parker's Spider-Man? You get Spider-Boy. Spider-Boy is one of those rare and amazing creations that came out of the days of Amalgam Comics. For those who are unfamiliar with Amalgam Comics, it was a magical joint comic line that existed between both DC Comics and Marvel Comics. These two publishers came together to combine their worlds, mashing up heroes and stories to give us new characters who were inspired by their roster of superheroes and supervillains from each of their unique multiverses. Spider-Boy, as such, is one of those characters. Spider-Boy was a clone who was created by Project Cadmus to be a duplicate of the Amalgam Universe's Super Soldier, but with the added ability to manipulate gravity. Peter Parker was the scientist who was in charge of creating this clone, but he died during the process after his project was basically sabotaged. As a result, the clone created was much younger than intended. He was named Pete after his creator by General Thaddeus Ross, who was overseeing this project. Unfortunately, Ross, who Pete came to know as his Uncle Jen, was killed by a mugger. As a result, Pete lamented his young age as this had made the mugger dismiss him and focus on Ross. Spider-Boy vowed from that day on to become undismissible, so all criminals would focus on him instead of innocent bystanders. Number 5, Spider-Man. Another one of my favorite alternate spider weirdos is Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man spun out of a what-if story, which aimed to answer the question, what if Aunt May had been bitten by a radioactive spider? The question we were all, I'm sure, itching to know the answer to at the time. This first happened to May in issue number 23 of the 1977 What If series. May was basically bringing Peter his lunch, which he had forgotten at home, when she was the one who ended up being bitten by the radioactive spider in his place. In May's reality, both Peter and Ben are still alive and well and actually act as her allies, while she fights to protect New York and stop criminals in their tracks. Kinda like a cute little family team. I love it. Number 4, Japanese Spider-Man, or Spider-Man, as he is also sometimes known. Japanese Spider-Man is very different from the one we know in North America. In Japan, Spider-Man actually had his own TV show, but with that he also got a radically different backstory. It's really wild and really great. If you think you know Spider-Man, you likely will be very surprised by this version of Spider-Man. Spider-Man here is Takayuya Yamashiro, who got his spider-like abilities from a dying alien. Along with these abilities, he was also given Leopardon, a giant robot mech spaceship. Yep. The alien who gave him his abilities is named Garia, and actually hails from another world known as Planet Spider. Prior to becoming the hero Spider-Man, and even after, Yamashiro was known for being a talented motocross racer. Also, the intro for the 1970 show is still one of my all-time favorite intros I've ever probably heard in the existence of television intros, and I honestly still think it slaps today. Number 3. Spider-Ham. This version of Spider-Man is actually a web-slinging cartoon pig. Spider-Ham hails from a reality that is similar to the Toontown we see in the classic film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Physics aren't really the same as our world, but instead are reimagined to be kind of wacky like how they are in classic cartoons. I don't know about you, but to me, this has always made Spider-Ham not only seem like one of the weirdest variants around, but also kind of one of the most powerful just because of that. Because I feel like if you have toon physics, like, watch out. Spider-Ham's civilian name is Peter Porker, and he hails from the reality designated number 8311. In Spider-Ham's origin story, he actually started out as a spider, but after being bitten by a radioactive sort of rage-fueled pig named May Porker, who actually was a scientist simply trying to try out an atomic-powered hairdryer at the time, which went awry and kind of put her into a fit of rage, he was transformed into a pig. This is the true story. Despite being turned into a pig, he still kept all of his spider-like abilities and powers, hence Spider-Ham. Number 2. Widow, aka Spider-Horse. Although if you look up Spider-Horse on Google, you might actually get a different character before you get Widow. But editorial speaking, Spider-Horse is still a name that is used with this character, so I'm still mentioning it here because I still think it's relevant, and I like saying Spider-Horse. Remember when I was telling you about web-slinger Patrick O'Hara living in the Wild Wild West times? Well, he's not the only one who receives spider-like abilities. No, no, no. His horse was also bitten by the same elixir-doused radioactive spider. And guess what? He got powers too. Widow is Patrick O'Hara's loyal steed, who also became a spider-like hero and even was recruited alongside Webslinger to join the Web Warriors and fight against the Inheritors during the Spider-Verse event. Spider-Horse is also one of the Spider-Man variants we see or will see in Across the Spider-Verse. Fun facts. At least it seems like we'll see him. He's in the trailer, so I feel like he's gonna be in there. Number 1. Spidey Super Stories. I love this one. The Electric Company actually brought us the first ever live action depiction of Spider-Man, if you can believe that, with their Spidey Super Stories skits. In these skits, Spider-Man was portrayed by puppeteer and dancer Danny Seagren. This version of Spider-Man never spoke, but instead acted out his intentions that were communicated by a narrator who told the story. Fun fact, Morgan Freeman was actually one of the actors who had narrating credits for these skits, so if you go back and listen to some of them, you might hear his very familiar voice. He was a member of the Electric Company cast, so that's why you will hear that. In these stories, Spider-Man took on villains like Dr. Fly and Spoiler. Spoiler was all about ruining things for folks, hence his name, Spoiler. He likes to spoil things. Dr. Fly, on the other hand, was a half-human, half-mutant who wanted to transform everyone on the planet into a mutant like he was. All of these villains were so strange and so great, and you should go back and watch some of these skits because they're pretty fantastic.
Number 10. Lord Logan. With What If crushing it on Disney Plus currently, we have to take a look at this insane version of Logan from What If Volume 2, Issue 24. What if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? I'm still Team Edward, I don't care. The main difference is, of course, that Wolverine has a lust for blood this time around. Other than that, his characteristics don't change too much. His healing factor prevents him from turning, so he takes it upon himself to sink his own teeth into Dracula. Guy's a badass, go over Big D himself. One of the craziest parts here is when Wolverine quickly turns into a werewolf, he tells Dracula he's a quick learner, and now we have a new Dracula, Lord Logan. With Dracula's blood in him now, he loses any sense of humanity, and he's even more aggressive after than Dracula was. He turns over the New Mutants, he turns over the Hellfire Club, the Freedom Force, the Morlocks, everybody is getting bit. Doctor Strange was able to cast a spell to keep the undead out of his sanctum, but Vampire Juggernaut figured out a way and subsequently broke his body in one punch before becoming a snack himself. It's a pretty epic time. It's like a bat versus a wolf for a bit. It's great, go check it out. Number 9, Rancor. Making her first appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy issue 8 back in the early 90s, Rancor was born in the alternate reality of Earth 691 in the 30th century future of the Guardians. She was a 5th generation descendant of Wolverine, and she wasn't very heroic to say the least. She rules over a colony, and apparently every descendant of the Wolverine family line followed the same dark path. On her 16th birthday, Rancor clawed her father's beating heart out of his chest, and then of course she became the next ruler, and her first plan of attack was to enslave the entire human population. Happy birthday! Do you want a car? No, I want all the humans in the world. Thank you, give me. After the Guardians defeated her and destroyed her planet, she stole one of Wolverine's claws from the Shi'ar Museum and headed out for Earth. Now she alongside her lieutenants were captured and recruited by Dr. Doom, so Rancor helped Doom locate the Inhumans on the moon. She turned against Doom and was eventually rescued by the Guardians, but Doom had this pretty sweet weapon with him the whole time. But before we explain that weapon, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, those likes really do wonders for our channel. You're amazing. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's get right back to the list. Number 8, Roboclaw. James Gunn has brought the Guardians to life in such a unique and fun way, but back in those early issues, we meet a pretty terrifying version of Logan. Dr. Doom revealed that he had Wolverine's adamantium skeleton and he had killed Logan at some point in the past, and then Doom transferred his own brain into the adamantium skeleton. So now he's like kind of like a robot version. It's pretty sweet. To see Rancor fight this Terminator version of her own family is pretty mind-bending. It's very entertaining. Rancor is using that same Wolverine claw that she found at the museum as a weapon, enforcing the fact that possessing a weapon means nothing without the ability to use it. She then stabs the Doom skeleton right in the eye, and that does the trick, followed by a little shock therapy.
Number 7, Mephisto. Within the Marvel Universe, Mephisto is, for all intents and purposes, the devil. He isn't actually. Technically, he is a demonic hell lord who rules over his own hell-like dimension and enjoys stealing people's souls by tricking them, and he does that by pretending he is the actual devil, playing on people's fears, so basically, he's the devil. While Mephisto is within his dimension, which he calls hell, he is immortal, omniscient, and impossible to destroy. It's only when he ventures into other realms that he can be defeated, but doing so just kind of returns him back to his own dimension. He has been a major player in the Marvel Universe since his creation and has been either a key or supporting player for many major events. He was the Snake in the old Adam and Eve story. He was directly responsible for the creation of Ghost Rider. He's infamously erased the history of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's marriage in order to save Aunt May's life. I mean, he even popped up a hotel out of the ground in Las Vegas that manipulated the citizens and let him take their souls. He has been defeated and outmaneuvered multiple times, but he has never permanently been stopped. Number 6, the Phoenix Force. Now it's important to say the Phoenix Force is not a villain, technically. It is a cosmic entity representing all life in the Omniverse. The Phoenix Force will exist as long as there is, was, or will be life. If the Phoenix Force were to be destroyed, if that were even possible, all life would follow after it, as well as the ability for life to have begun in the first place. The Phoenix Force is just a force of nature, but it has been used as a darker force of power in the past. For example, when it inhabited Jean Grey during the Dark Phoenix saga. It was at this time the entity was a villain, using Jean's insane levels of psychic power, which it then amplified to godlike levels. With this entity inhabiting her body, Jean and the Phoenix destroyed an entire solar system and attacked her fellow X-Men. Jean had to actually bring her own end just to stop what was happening, and when the Phoenix regained its memories of all the evil it had done, it brought Jean back to life to help make things a little better. And that's not the only time. There was the whole X-Men versus Avengers thing, and there was that time that Thane, Thanos' son, had the Phoenix Force. Almost every time the power of the Phoenix Force comes up, it usually corrupts its bearer and makes like a big stink. Like a huge stink. Big old fart. Number 5, Dormammu. Most fans of Doctor Strange know Dormammu. This being composed of pure magic energy rules the dark dimension and spends most of his time taking over other realities as he finds them. He is essentially immortal and capable of wielding godly power over magic, the dead, souls, and pretty much anything, really. When he is in our reality, he can be thwarted and returned to his own, usually by the Sorcerer Supreme, but within the dark dimension, he reigns supreme and cannot be taken down like at all. Using his vast magical abilities and the influence of his power, he is constantly trying to invade our reality, and even when he is banished back or he is stopped, he always comes back eventually, and he has been doing this for millennia. Number 4, the Beyonder. The Beyonder is a singular entity with no duplicate versions of himself in other universes, similar to the Phoenix Force. And also a lot like the Phoenix Force, Beyonder is basically like a baby in that he is a younger member of a race called the Beyonders that are a near omnipotent alien race from a dimension outside of the multiverse. He is himself basically a whole universe. It's really hard to explain, but as he observes Earth and the Marvel Universe and the various races, he gets a little curious, and the Beyonder decides to study and analyze life and humanity, good and evil and conflict, and to that purpose he pits Earth's mightiest heroes and villains against each other in the Secret Wars. Now, he did this by destroying an entire system of planets and creating Battleworld from the remains and from parts of Earth. So that's one level of power right there. Beyonder's powers surpass that of Eternity and the Living Tribunal, but that has been retconned recently. And he is capable of manipulating reality to his will, being able to pretty much do whatever he wants and then grant himself any power he wants. It was actually a huge treat though last year in the Defenders Beyond story when we learned that the Beyonder and his race were actually still in existence, and he was now an adult existing with the rest of the adult Beyonders outside of the multiverse and being all levels of wildly insanely powerful. There's a lot I skimmed over here to make it less confusing, but you should just go read all the Secret Wars if you want to see how crazy these beings actually are. Number 3, Cyttorak. Cyttorak, also known as the Destroyer, is an incredibly powerful extra-dimensional being who was worshipped as a god and as a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos, which is where he comes from. Now, as the Destroyer, Cyttorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. Simple as that. To do this though, from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other godlike deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, which kinda gives us 2 different versions of Unstoppable all wrapped up into one package. You're welcome. Merry Christmas. That's for you. As the Juggernaut is essentially a physically unstoppable force of kinetic energy, unless you're the Hulk, I guess, then you can stop him. I don't know why. Anyways, Cyttorak is such a powerful and unstoppable godlike entity that you will even hear magic users invoking his name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak. Number 2, the Chaos King. While he is relatively obscure, he is nothing to scoff at. Amatsu Mikobashi, first appearing in Thor Blood Oath number 6 in 2006, was mistaken as the Japanese god of chaos and evil, but in actuality, he was an aspect of the cosmic being Oblivion. Now, Mikobashi ruled and thrived over the Earth when it was nothing more than a formless void of primordial darkness. And as such, his goal now is to put an end to creation and bring about a new age of chaos and void and darkness. He is a primordial being who was imprisoned in Yomi, which is the Shinto underworld, which is where he remained for centuries, accruing an army of Oni, which is Shinma demons, and other monsters. Now, during the events of Ares, god of war, Chaos King attacks Olympus after he defeated and controlled the Japanese pantheon of gods, and after the fall of Asgard during Ragnarok. This is what kind of kickstarts his mission in Chaos War, where he slays the Egyptian gods, Celtic gods, Shi'ar gods, gods of Zen law. He takes out Nightmare in the dream dimension, destroys Mephisto, and casts Mistress Death out of hell, making her literally run away. And he releases the souls of the damned. He did all that. He has the power to defeat Eternity and is practically unfazed by attacks from the likes of Zeus. God Hercules, Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Thor together could not defeat Chaos King. To win, Hercules had to literally punch him into a portal to an endless void of nothingness, and this was after he destroyed 98.76% of the entire universe. That's a lot. Number 1, Chthon. Chthon is one of the most powerful demons to ever exist. Even though he predates anything like this, of all the devil-like demons out there, including Mephisto, Chthon is the closest thing to the actual devil. He and his Ngari actually ruled the earth before the angel Lucifer attacked them, and that was before Lucifer ever rebelled against heaven and became the actual devil. Chthon himself is responsible for all the witches, werewolves, vampires, and other dark creatures, as well as being the master of the most powerful form of magic, chaos magic, which is the same stuff used by the Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch has altered all of reality with just a fraction of that magic, so yeah, it's a lot. His opposite, Oshter, is one of the 3 beings that make up the Vishanti, and they stand in direct opposition to Chthon specifically, creating the Book of Vishanti in response to Chthon's Darkhold. Other demons and dark sorcerers, including Dormammu and Mephisto, call on Chthon's name to cast some of their strongest spells, and the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, was almost corrupted and permanently taken out by Chthon's mere presence alone. He is extremely hard to bring down, and even if you manage to do so, it's only a matter of time until he comes back.
Number 10, Spiders Man. If you were wondering if I misspoke there, no I did not. Spiders Man is one of my favorite alternates out there actually because, well, he's just so creepy. He's definitely a weirdo because he is literally made out of spiders. Ugh. This version of Peter Parker, instead of being bit by a radioactive spider, actually fell into basically like a vat of experimental spiders. As a result, he was consumed by them them, and his consciousness manifested within them. Although the real Peter Parker was actually dead and gone, being completely devoured, his mind lived on in the spiders who were connected by his consciousness and came together to create basically a humanoid form. This version of Spider-Man really can never reveal his secret identity, as doing so would reveal that he's actually not a person at all, but just a bunch of spiders all huddled together in the shape of a man. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk about Spider-Man content, I love talking about Spider-Man and all of the Spider-Verse stuff, be sure to check out our Spider-Man playlist. We've got a lot more content over there for you. Number 9. Web Slinger. I love this alternate Spider-Man. While odd, I'd also say he's a pretty cool variant as well. This alternate version of Spider-Man hails from the Wild Wild West. Patrick O'Hara hails from the alternate reality of Earth 31913. He was a traveler who would show off his shooting skills in shows, giving gun presentations. Doc Morbius also traveled along with him. While Patrick would show off his shooting skills along the road, Morbius would sell his elixir. One day, the elixir doused a radioactive spider, and after that spider bit Patrick, he noticed he now had spider-like abilities and powers. Tragically, Morbius began to drink his elixir, which actually turned him into a vampire, forcing the web-slinger to track down his once old friend and defeat him. That's what you do to vampires, especially when they're being all creepy and drinking people's blood. Number 8. Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk is a strange one, but is also another favorite of mine from the Spider-Verse. Spider-Punk seems to be one of the alternate versions of Spider-Man that we'll see appearing in Across the Spider-Verse. This version of Spider-Man is not Peter Parker, but instead Hobie Brown, or Hobbert Brown. In this reality, Hobie Brown is a punk rocker who not only possesses spider-like abilities, but also the power of rock. In fact, at one point he actually used his music skills to defeat an alternate version of Venom, cranking up the volume and using an army of amps. Now, of course, this Venom was very different, but still, it's a super cool story. I love it. Number 7. Superior Spider-Man. What if one of Spider-Man's greatest foes became Spider-Man himself? Well, we know what happens because this actually has happened. Actually a few times in the comics. Now, one of the most memorable and strangest occurrences of this was when Spider-Man actually traded bodies with Dr. Octopus. You know, I've short-formed that name so much in recent years that it actually feels weird to say his whole supervillain title name now, Dr. Octopus. Why does that feel so weird? Otto at the time was on his deathbed, and in an attempt to save his mind and preserve it, managed to trick Peter into swapping bodies with him. Initially, Doc Ock just wanted to use Peter's younger body to save himself, and actually had no interest in taking Peter's place. However, as Peter in Otto's body lay on now his deathbed, because they'd swapped bodies and he was in Otto's failing body, he managed to convince Otto that the world needed Spider-Man, and to take up the mantle and continue what Peter had started when he became Spider-Man years ago. Otto surprised us all by actually agreeing, vowing to act as a hero, and to even do better than Peter had, dubbing himself Superior Spider-Man, which honestly, that last part, not so surprising for Otto Octavius. Although ultimately, Otto wouldn't necessarily do better, he wouldn't necessarily be a better Spider-Man. Some very interesting things came out of this massive storyline, and there are still some people that argue that Superior Spider-Man is better, so I mean, I guess that's for you, the reader, to decide.
Danger. This villain is definitely a weird one. It's basically just the humanoid form of the Danger Room, a highly sophisticated computer interface that the X-Men used to train. But in 2009's astonishing X-Men number 9, the Danger Room comes to life and takes on a humanoid form that calls itself Danger. Although I know this isn't a what if issue, in 2010's What If Astonishing X-Men number 1, Danger gets a more focused storyline, and it's even weirder than you might expect. Basically, Ultron somehow catches wind that Danger has come to life and falls in love with her. They become a couple and go on a murder spree, killing all the X-Men and then eventually Professor X himself. Then they take to the cosmos and continue to kill all the organic life forms in their path, until they finally establish their own intergalactic empire. It's later pondered by the Watcher that if Professor X had only listened to Danger when she declared that she had gained sentience, she wouldn't have been so inclined to take him down. It's sort of a cool message about the dangers of AI, but first and foremost, it's just a weird antagonist in this what if issue. The Danger Room gets married to Ultron. It doesn't get much weirder than that, I don't think.
Number 5, Thanos. Another one of my favorites has to come from the What If Disney Plus streaming show, where we actually got to see what Thanos would be like if he were on the side of good. So technically here, I guess he's a hero, but of course in the main continuity we know him better as a villain, both in the comics and the MCU, so yeah. Thanos ends up joining the Ravagers and becoming a close ally of Star-Lord in episode 2 of the show, where we get to explore what the world would be like if T'Challa, instead of Peter Quill, ended up as Star-Lord. And guess what? Turns out the world would potentially be a lot better for it, minus the imminent doom of the universe as a result of Ego's plot to kind of like take it over, but ignoring that. Other than that, it was doing pretty well for itself, I gotta say. Thanos didn't even snap half the universe out of existence in this reality, and all because T'Challa convinced him not to do so by simply talking him down. Man, where was Black Panther when that was happening before? Why didn't he just come in and be like, hey, look, Thanos, no. Maybe he's got to travel in space before he can have those conversational skills. Maybe that's why.
At number 4 is Cable. So in this 2-part What If issue, Cable is the bad guy and he actually kills his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey, as well as Professor X. Professor X seems to be getting a lot of heat on this list. And even though this is a what if and basically anything goes, it's just a really bizarre call to have part of the X-Men family travel through time to kill his parents and their noble mentor Charles Xavier. This naturally doesn't go unnoticed and actually starts an all-out war between the X-Men and the X-Force. And while these two groups are duking it out, Magneto takes the opportunity to take control of Washington, D.C., which segues into that second part I mentioned, aptly named What If Magneto Took Over the USA. But regardless, this just made me feel weird to see a character we're used to seeing as a hero just take a sudden turn to evil, so much to the point where he kills his own flesh and blood in a brutal massacre. And why? Well, they have some differences in ideology, but why does that matter if they're in the past? Couldn't Cable have just stayed in his own time and believed in stuff over there? Although he's not really known to stay in his own time very often. It's just that he normally does it for good instead of doing it to start a massive war that ends in Sentinels dropping nukes on Washington and killing everyone. I don't know, was it worth it, Cable? Check out the issue and see if you think.
Number 3, Elektra. Elektra makes an appearance in the 1977 What If series in issue number 34. This being a humor issue, we get to take a look at what might have happened had Elektra survived her run-in with Bullseye. Even though Elektra at this time was depicted as a villain, or, you know, at least an extremely edgy anti-hero, it seems that this one-panel take on the character has her reconsider her life of crime as a result of her near-death experience. This is pretty weird, considering I'm pretty sure at this point Elektra would have had already a few near-death experiences in her line of work as an assassin. So, like, unless she knew she was going to die here and then that's not what happened, but I feel like for her this is just an average Tuesday. Elektra even goes so far as to consider settling down and getting married, and I quote, or something. What is or something? Also, Elektra getting married just because she didn't die from Bullseye fighting her? Wow, that just seems a little unbelievable. Anything can happen in an alternate reality.
Number 2 is Dazzler. In What If number 33, the question is asked, what if Dazzler had become the Herald of Galactus? These days, Dazzler is known to be a relatively stagnant member of the X-Men and doesn't usually get a lot of mention in the mainstream. Sorry, Amanda. Amanda really likes Dazzler. However, in the 80s, it was a totally different story. Right before this issue of What If in 1981, Dazzler is taken on by Galactus as his herald, but only to complete a quick mission to retrieve his original herald. Then she goes back home. But fast forward 1 year later to 1982, and in this What If, the situation is revisited again, but in this case, she stays as his herald and actually becomes one of the most powerful villains in all the cosmos. The Herald of Galactus is an individual imbued with part of Galactus' power cosmic, and their job is to fly around the cosmos and look for planets for Galactus to consume. So it's a pretty big deal to be given the title of Herald, both for the one who's selected and for the people of the cosmos, because if you're doing your job right as a herald, you'd best believe you're ruining and ending the lives of countless others. So, for Dazzler, of all the heroes to be taken in by Galactus and given this responsibility, it just leaves me with a weird feeling in my gut. Like, why would a character that barely wants to be a hero and only really wants to sing, like why would they take on the job of Herald of Galactus? The answer does lie in this issue, but it's still a bit confusing and maybe a bit out of character for Dazzler, which is why I put it at number 2.
Number 1. Susie Richards. In issue number 30 of the 1989 What If series, Susie, Reed and Sue's second child, becomes the villain. Susie is obviously meant to be a stand-in for Valeria Richards, who we have now, their daughter, who has a weird history where she was kind of both the oldest and then like the youngest child of the fantastic duo. It's confusing, but don't worry about it. In this version of the story, she is most definitely just the younger, but despite being the younger sibling between her and Franklin, she still terrifies her brother, who in the main continuity was once known for insanely powerful reality warping abilities. Although I don't think he has those in this reality. But anyways, you know you're scary when you're scaring Franklin. Even a young Franklin. Susie is an evil little girl who it turns out was possessed by a hellspawn that came from the negative zone. In the end, Franklin is forced to fight and defeat her, but unfortunately all too late, as the rest of his family has already been killed by her. Even Dr. Doom doesn't stand a chance against the possessed Susie. Poor Franklin, he warned everyone, but they didn't listen.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Anthony the Vampire. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Avengers issue 14, Anthony was the greatest vampire hunter who ever walked this earth. He trained Daredevil, Blade, and Edward Cullen. Okay, the last one I lied about, but still, you get it. When he meets up with Blade later on, he has a new look. He was eventually bitten by a vampire, so he became their leader as well. The coolest part about Anthony is that he uses a Mark 1 Iron Man suit to get around during the day, so the sun doesn't, evaporate him or whatever. He captured and turned Smart Hulk into a bloodsucker, but his armor was stolen and used by Stick to fight back. Another Tony, another suit. Imagine you're in trouble and this guy rolls up on you. What a surprise that would be. Issue 16 of Ultimate Avengers opens with a great Twilight parody, but this is also the last time we see this Iron Man take flight. And that's because Hulk punched his head off, and usually when he does that, you don't come back, vampire or not. Number 9. Iron Lantern. From the Amalgam comic universe, Iron Lantern is of course a millionaire who is in charge of Stark Aircraft. While he's working on a flight simulator, it straight up took off and flew him somewhere else. Best simulator ever, if I do say so myself. Then he crash landed on the ground, injuring Stark, and he realized he was brought to a crashed alien spaceship. That spaceship belonged to none other than Roman Sur, who died before getting a chance to talk to Hal Stark. Not being in the best condition, obviously, after the rocky landing, Hal started working with his newfound tech on a new suit, hopefully to save his life. The Green Lantern upgrade of his suit saved his life for sure, but it also gave him the power to create anything out of green energy. He used a battery that reminded him of a lantern to do so. And then he went on to fight the aliens that had shot down Roman Sur and continued fighting enemies such as Madame Sapphire and Mandarin Esto, who, yes, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It really helps us out here quite a bit. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get right back into this list of weird Iron Mans. Number 8, Lord Iron. Coming from Marvel 1602, Lord Iron was amongst the other heroes who rose to fame, but a little bit back in time. See, Captain America was literally shot back in time, so the Age of Heroes has to begin there. And in turn, we get some fun versions of our Avengers. Anthony Stark was taken and held captive in the Holy Land during the English and Spanish War, a little different than the cave that he ended up with in our time. He was forced to make weapons still for them for weeks, mirroring Tony's origin in a fun, older way. David Banner was torturing him this time around though, so Anthony makes his own suit powered by lightning bottles. Okay. Now it doesn't matter which timeline Tony ends up in, he's destined to be Iron Man one way or another.
Coming in at number 7, we have the powerless Dr. Stephen Strange. In issue number 40 of the first volume of Marvel's original What If comics, we got to see an alternate reality where Baron Mordo wound up becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. And while most of the story would focus on Mordo's misadventures in the role, Dr. Strange's role in it is definitely unique to say the least. When Stephen Strange showed up on the Ancient One's doorstep, wondering if there was any possibility the mystic arts could heal his hands, the Ancient One simply taught him some anxiety-decreasing meditation, and then sent him on his way, making Strange believe that it was all some sort of yoga retreat. This version of Strange would go on to merely become a peaceful professor at a medical school, which, compared to the Sorcerer Supreme's usual lifestyle, is definitely a little bit, well, strange. Coming in at number 6, we have Strange Supreme from the first season of the Disney Plus show, What If? In an alternate timeline where instead of losing his hands in a car accident, Stephen Strange instead has to endure the loss of the love of his life, Dr. Christine Palmer. Desperate to bring her back, Strange trains in the mystic arts but finds himself drawn to much darker powers as he realizes that Christine's death is a fixed point in this timeline, and it would take an incredible amount of magical power to undo it. Turning to the dark side and becoming Strange supreme, Strange absorbs centuries worth of magical beings before finally absorbing even his own better self. Tragically, even when he does have enough power to save Christine, she is disgusted at the monster he's become to save her, leaving him alone as the entire universe collapses around him. Coming in at number 5, we have the elderly Doctor Strange from Earth 982. An alternate universe that mainly focused on potential children of Marvel heroes and the next generation of crime fighters, Earth 982, or MC2 as it's more commonly known, is also home to one of the most unique versions of Doctor Strange because instead of his traditional salt and pepper look, this Stephen Strange has gone full Gandalf the White. Having long since retired from the position of Sorcerer Supreme, an elderly Strange is called back into action as a master of the mystic arts when the new wielder of the role, Doc Magus, begins to tamper with darker powers. And while Strange would need help from the younger generation of heroes, this grizzled but still magical sorcerer is definitely one of the coolest looking versions of the character. Coming in at number 4, we have Doctor Strange of the year 1602 from the Marvel series of the same name. In this offshoot of the multiverse where many of Marvel's classic heroes were now born during the era of the 17th century, Dr. Stephen Strange was an advisor to the first Queen Elizabeth, and the right-hand man to the monarchy when it came to all matters relating to magic. This old-timey take on the character would be weird enough on its own, but gets extra bizarre when you consider that this version of Strange was eventually executed by the monarchy for treason, but continued to give guidance to this Earth's heroes as a ghost from the afterlife. Talk about not retiring when your time is up, am I right? Coming in at number 3, we're back in the world of animal puns with Croctor Strange. That's right, Loki isn't the only magical hero with an alligator alter ego. Hailing from the same reality as the meme-worthy Spectacular Spider-Man, Croctor Strange is an anthropomorphic crocodile who learned his magic from a being known as the Rancid One and often clashes with the pig-themed Dormammu. And if that's not punny enough for you, this version of Strange is also a member of the Unhumanati instead of the Illuminati, which also features a mouse-themed version of Iron Man. Ooh, and I thought they said Disney taking over wouldn't have any weird side effects. Coming in at number 2, we have a wild combination with the DC Universe with Doctor Strange Fate. During the Marvel vs. DC miniseries of comics, an alternate reality known as Amalgam Comics was born, featuring combinations of iconic DC and Marvel heroes put into one body. One of the most notable of all of these crazy combinations was the being known as Doctor Strange Fate, a three-way mix-up between Dr. Stephen Strange, Dr. Charles Xavier, and the DC hero Dr. Fate. Man, this guy's got more PhDs than a diploma factory. With all of these magical, telepathic, and reality-warping powers combined, Dr. Strange Fate was incredibly powerful, but one of the weirdest aspects of the character was the fact that he knew he was just a temporary creation of a crossover event, and thus spent much of his time attempting to find a way to keep his reality ongoing. How very meta of you, Doctor Strange Fate. And finally, coming in at our top spot is the only Doctor Strange variant with feathers. We have Ductor Strange. Hailing from the same weird world as Howard the Duck, aka Earth 791,021, you might be wondering why a duck-themed version of Doctor Strange is labeled as weirder than a crocodile-themed one. And that is because this Ductor Strange is also a drunk. Studying under the ancient wino, this Strange's version of communicating with spirits is literally drinking spirits, although he does still possess enough magical energy to be able to transport himself and various other duck-themed heroes to different dimensions, including the mainstream Marvel universe. Just maybe lay off the booze a little bit, I'm not sure how well birds can handle their liquor.